What's good, IB Nation? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, post-game edition. And we are talking about Notre Dame's 31-13 victory on the road against Georgia Tech. And fellas, this was probably didn't get started the way we all wanted it to. I think we can all agree on that, but I think it finished off just fine. And Notre Dame got their sea legs or woke up or whatever analogy that you want to use. They figured it out, and then things were really, really good down the stretch. So Notre Dame picks up a big win. If anybody was watching the TV broadcast, they now know that Notre Dame has a 63% chance of making the college football playoff. Because if you didn't know beforehand, you do now, because they just rammed it down your throat, even though we're 3 weeks away from any kind of college football playoff ranking or anything else. But at least now we all are aware where Notre Dame stands along with everybody else. And thank goodness they were able to tack on those style points, fellas. And if anybody doesn't know me, you know that I'm being very sarcastic right now. But fellas, let's break this thing down. Let's talk about Notre Dame's win. It bumps them to 6-1 at the moment. And based on outcomes of other games that have already taken place and are going to take place this evening, they should bump up in the rankings as well tomorrow. So let's break it down. We'll go clockwise like we always do. Trevor, give me your thoughts on this game, and take it whatever direction you want, my friend.
You got it. I was definitely going to touch on first takeaway was how badly they wanted everybody in the world to know Notre Dame's odds to make the playoffs, with a win, with a loss, whatever it is. So that was my first takeaway. But in all seriousness, this team showed a lot of resiliency today. I started to get a little bit of PTSD around, I talked about it earlier in the week, where Marcus Freeman's 4-0 coming off of the bye. And in the games following the bye week, there's been a struggle. There has been a lapse of, call it preparation, call it focus, and through the first 3 to 4 total series of the games, I started getting a little nervous, because it started to have that 2023 Clemson feel, that 2022 Stanford feel, and I was like, all right, well, here we go. We're going to figure out what kind of team this is going to be, and they stepped it up when they had to in different areas, right? So, Vince, you touched on it. It's not the most perfect win in the world, but for all things considered, if Notre Dame wins basically 31-7 in a not perfect win, I'm always going to be happy with that at the end of the day. There's things that we can go through and we can nitpick, and what we'll talk about, offensive, defensive, and I know we're going to get into that throughout the show, but overall, this team showed me that they are a resilient football team. We've kind of been looking for that identity, and what is this team going to be about? You lose your starting NFL draft caliber first-round pick cornerback earlier this week. And, there's still those mounting injuries on defense that a lot of people are talking about. It's become the topic of discussion for Notre Dame's defense. Are they still going to be as good as they are? And they played really well today outside of a couple of plays. So, overall, I'm happy with the win. Offensively, I have questions, as I do every single week when Notre Dame gets done playing. But at the end of the day, rattling off on offense 24 straight points, and as a team 31 straight points, it's a sign of a resilient football team, man. That's where I'm at ultimately, because I know we're going to dive in pretty deep throughout the show,
as we always do. Thanks, Trevor. Sean, your thoughts on Notre Dame's win over Georgia Tech?
Great scrimmage to get us ready for Navy.
When did you ever think those words were going to come out of your mouth, by the way?
Exactly, right? But you look at the style of the game, and I think Marcus Freeman pointed this out in one of his comments to the guys that were calling the game, where he said, look, we can't have limited possessions in a half, and 2 of the 4 end in interception and not being able to put points on the board. He's telling you this is the same game we're going to have to play next week against a better team. So we have to clean things up right now offensively to make sure that when we get to Navy next week, we're clicking on all cylinders, and to come out and put forth that offensive effort in the second half is disappointing. But other than that, what Trevor pointed out, how the defense stepped up, and Mike Mickens is, his development of these young players, and there is not one player that has played meaningful minutes from that secondary that did not flash at some point or make a play. Everyone has been able to make a play or a flash, and that bodes well for this. Drake Bowen, I'm sure we'll go more in depth. Hey, man, look, Vince, hey, I tried to tell you. You had your doubts, Vince. We all had our doubts because I think he wasn't playing because he was thinking too much, right?
Agreed.
It looked like he was playing slow. No, he was playing slow because he was thinking too much. And now we're starting to see everything become a little bit faster. And now he's just playing football and really becoming the captain. It's almost like you're watching Kaiser pass the torch to Drake Bowen as the true captain of that defense in the middle of that defense. And there's just some things that you watch and see with this team. I'm amazed. I said this, they're playing better football the more people they lose to injury. As a team collectively, they're playing better.
Not wild.
It's wild with less talent, right? But Marcus Freeman has found some way to get this team. I think defensively, they know who they are. I think offensively, they know who they are and who they need to be. Now it's just a matter of the coaches and the players getting there from a play calling and execution standpoint, right? It just seems like either the play calling's off or questionable, or either the execution of certain things are off. But I'm sure all of us will point out certain things during this show. But overall, you have to be ecstatic with this type of win. They dominated a good team and an offensive line that gave up one sack. That second half, that defensive line really got after them. And that was really good to see. It really was. So overall, you have to be excited. And Navy's next up, right?
Hit it, Ryan. Thoughts?
It's well said, Sean. You stole my Drake Bowen, and I want to raise you a Drake Bowen because I want to talk quickly about I guess this is a shout out back to my my old days of recruiting at Irish Breakdown. Okay, the 2023 recruiting class is my biggest takeaway from this football game. I'm literally in the process of writing an article about this right now. So Drake Bowen obviously included in that 9 total tackles, pass breakup in this game. Not to be outdone by Jeremiah Love, who had 17 touches for 93 and a touchdown. Jaden Greathouse had 3 catches for 43 yards. Jaden Osbury had 5 tackles and an incredible tackle for loss in space. Christian Gray was locked down on one side of the field, and Adon Schuler had a pick 6 for a touchdown. So if you want to ask me about my biggest takeaway from this game, we have heard since he came to Notre Dame how great of a recruiter Marcus Freeman is. Well, the 2023 recruiting class is my biggest takeaway. We saw all these sophomores flying around everywhere, man. And were there things that people need to improve upon? Absolutely. Were there blunders? Were there missteps at times? Absolutely. But you know what I saw? Notre Dame was the fastest team on the field tonight against a team that, by the way, I know they didn't have Haynes King. They're very, very fast, man. Like, there's a lot of speed on the Georgia Tech side of things, and Notre Dame is the fastest team on that field tonight. And that big part of that is that 2023 recruiting class, which is bananas how productive they were tonight.
Well, and it's bananas how much they actually are forced to lean on the 23 recruiting class right now, even though those guys are producing. You're 100% correct. But the fact that they have to lean on that group and the fact that they are producing the way that they are is, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's outstanding that these guys are true freshmen and they're like, no, we got this. We're good. We're going to keep doing what we've been doing and why we are who we were when we got recruited. And it doesn't matter who we play against. Like, that is, it's impressive and scary all at the same time as to what these guys could be once they actually get their sea legs. Like, these are guys that don't have a ton of experience and they're just going out and playing ball. And kudos to Al Golden and Marcus Freeman for that matter, because if we're going to blame him, we also have to credit him for stuff, right? For just letting those guys go out and play and not overloading them with a bunch of stuff to make them, paralysis by analysis and all. Like, these guys are just going out and they're just playing ball, man. And it's fun to watch. Hit it.
Well, Vince, if I can say this too, I mean, because you're right, some guys have been pressed into more duty than maybe they were even ready for. But I think, you weren't keeping Christian Gray off the field this year. You weren't keeping Drake Bowen off the field this year. Like, some of these guys have just they've made their mark on this program very early on, and it gets you super excited, obviously, for the future. And my last big takeaway from this game, Notre Dame has a 63% chance to make the playoffs, so that's good.
I'm glad we're able to figure all that out because it's very, very important to understand where Notre Dame is in the playoff hunt. Does anybody here think an 11-1 Notre Dame team isn't going to make the playoff, by the way? Just going to throw that out there because apparently they have to have style points in order to make that happen.
Well, as they perfectly pointed out in the broadcast today, if there's a picture-perfect scenario somehow in the Big Ten and that Group of 5 team also goes undefeated, then there is a possibility that Notre Dame is the 13th team instead of the 12th team. So, according to them.
It's good to know. I mean, it's good to know that I'm glad that we were reminded of that. On the regular, so 31-7, obviously going into the final drive of the game, Georgia Tech puts one on the board. So big picture, let's just talk about it. Big picture, gentlemen, and anybody can jump in on this one. Does that matter? Does that last touchdown matter? Because it mattered to the guys in the booth. Does it matter in reality that Georgia Tech was able to score at the end there against Notre Dame's like 80% second team guys?
No, it doesn't matter because Notre Dame's the only one in control of their destiny. If they lose again, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. If they go full-fledged and go 11-1, they're probably going to make it. I mean, someone literally asked me on Twitter today, Vince, was like, "Hey, would you mind doing an article each week where you talk about like what would be the best case scenario for Notre Dame for opponents, right? Like opponents' performances and stuff." And I'm just like, at first I was like, "Oh, that's a pretty cool idea," but then I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, it doesn't matter though. Like if Notre Dame loses another game, they're done. If they win all this, they're in. Like that's all that matters ultimately, right? So I doesn't matter to me. It's really cliche to say a win is a win, but if Notre Dame wins out the rest of the year and they're 11-1, they'll be in the playoff. Like maybe style points will matter in the end when we're talking about like the flashy resume being the number 6 seed versus number 7 seed or the 7 versus 8. Like maybe that stuff will matter in the end, but it doesn't matter. I think the main point of like the frustration with the broadcast is that the style points aren't whether you're going to make the playoffs or not. It's about maybe where you'll be seated potentially. Like that's the only conversation that happens. So yeah, I'm not overly worried about them scoring a garbage touchdown and making it 31-13 in the end.
Could not agree more. Just wanted to throw it out there just to make sure I'm not alone in the matter. So, overall thoughts, guys, as far as what this game means for Notre Dame and, in the season, obviously we talked about playoff, whatever, but like overall coming off the game that they had against Stanford, knowing what they have next week as well. Sean brought that up. What does this game, the way that they won it, the manner in which they won it, how does that, apply to the season as a whole and where they stand?
I mean, it was a really good win. It's a really good win against a good quality Georgia Tech football team. There's so many people that get wrapped up in, well, they weren't ranked. It's like, all right, well, Louisville wasn't ranked and they could have beaten Miami today. Like, it's just, don't get too wrapped up in where somebody is ranked in the top 25 affect your opinion on how good a football team actually is, right? This was an away. This is the first time that Notre Dame traveled to an away game in like weeks, right? You go down, you're playing in an NFL stadium. You're going up against a running back who last week had 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. You held him to 15 rushing yards today. That's what that means for this game. Before that final drive, Singleton and Rutherford as a duo averaged 8.2 yards per catch. Those are 2 receivers who coming into the season averaged 12.7 and 13.3 respectively. So this was a good win for Notre Dame. And I'm confident to say, because I know we're going to dive into it later in this show and talk about where they can make improvements, what we liked, what needs changed, what needs improved. But we're going to have a constructive conversation around a game where they essentially won by 24 points. And that's a really good spot to be in as people who break down the game, as fans. So there's a lot of things that we can look at in a positive light from this game. And always, there are things that need to be corrected. But from a season standpoint, I would say this was one of their tougher opponents left on the schedule because, the Stanford game was awesome when you look at the final score on paper and Notre Dame comes out of the bye and gets a win. But this one, it furthers Marcus Freeman. I think it ties his longest winning streak at Notre Dame. And this was one of their true road tests. This was the game post the game after the bye. And you saw a lot of flashes, as you guys talked about, from that 2023 recruiting class. So There's a lot to build off of here. It's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, Trevor, and I think the one thing that stands out for me, offensively and defensively, I want to point out on offensively, I thought the body language and the conversations between, and this is something we've talked about previously, but Mitchell Evans looked a lot better. Looked like he was enjoying himself. He was a more engaged blocker. They got him into the passing game, spreading him out. He and Riley Leonard were bumping fists, things of that nature. You see Adon Schuler with the pick six. You see R.J. Oldman following him down the sideline, celebrating with him. This team seems like it's becoming more of a team. Trevor talked about it, the resiliency. They fought through the BS. They fought through the obstacles of the early season. And now they're starting to see and starting to believe that they really can be a great team. They know they have more work to do, but that camaraderie that seems to be the energy that they play with offensively and defensively, we didn't see it a lot on the offensive side of the ball. It's starting to come along. And even with the injuries to key pieces, nothing has dropped off from energy, effort. Just Adon Schuler, effort-wise, gets the pick six because of effort. He fights over, sees Leonard Moore trailing, and fights to get in position to be able to cut off a big play. And because he's in position, covering his guy, he gets a pick six. Like, that type of stuff comes from that camaraderie, that energy, supporting one another, being there for one another. And that is something that bodes very well as they go into the second half of the schedule. Some things that I don't think we saw. I think they were kind of fighting it is a little bit, right? And allowing themselves to become frayed at the edges as a team and slightly pulled apart in certain situations when things didn't go right. And now, no matter what happens, you can see them just solidified as a team. That is huge, in my opinion, for this team moving forward, especially with a lot of youngsters playing. And that's kudos to those two big guys in the middle for 3 consecutive weeks, showing up and leading like they're supposed to lead as seniors. Tip of the cap to both of those guys.
Any big picture thoughts, Ryan, before we move on to the next segment?
No, I mean, I think that Sean hit on something that's important, and I think that Trevor hit on it as well, is that this team does seem to really enjoy playing with one another, which matters. I mean, I know some Notre Dame fans didn't love like the celebration with like Jaden Mickey a couple weekends ago, but I was like, dude, like that just shows that like they care, right? Like, I mean, they genuinely care about one another. So I don't think that that's a big deal overall. I just think more than anything, Notre Dame knows who they are, I think, at this point. Like, I keep talking about identity, but I think they do know their identity. I don't know if I 100% love their identity, to be honest. Like, I don't know if I love it, but they know who they are. I mean, like, Trevor was talking about the slow start, and I'm just like, I was just kind of kicked back and cooling because I was just like, just kind of expect them to start slow. Like, I just don't expect it anymore for them to start fast. But overall, they kicked it into gear, and I thought that we saw – I mean, like it was like the second or third series offensively. I think they really started clicking and they started understanding. They had some answers overall. I think the defense had answers after the early struggle. So I think overall this team is a little bit of a slow starter, but they found answers today. And that's more important than starting fast all the time, is having answers when things don't go your way.
Agreed. Good, solid win for Notre Dame. Big win as far as, going on the road. I mean, week 0, all of a sudden, this game was the one that was circled, right? When Georgia Tech beat top 10 Florida State and everything else. And it's like, whoa, all of a sudden, you're going on the road to play Georgia Tech. That's the biggest game on the schedule right now. Things have changed a little bit, obviously, now that we got up to this point. But that's still a good football team. And yes, they didn't have their starting quarterback. But the Pyron kid played probably the best game that he could have possibly played. I mean, let's be honest. If you've watched him play in the past, he's a great backup quarterback. He played his butt off today and got beaten up for it, especially there in the fourth quarter. I actually felt bad for the kid there for a little while because, I mean, every time he would drop back, he was getting hit by somebody, even when the second team guys came in. And so, he played the best game that he could. He was trying to push the ball down the field. They made some plays. He was finding the open guys, ran the ball somewhat effectively, when he had to. But look, that's a solid Georgia Tech team. Notre Dame took care of business. Look, outside of, the first drive is obviously a 3-and-out for Notre Dame offensively. Second drive, they're moving the ball pretty decently. Then he throws the pick. But then they score touchdown, next drive, touchdown, next drive, touchdown, next drive. Game's over at that point. I mean, so the game was never in doubt. Notre Dame did what they needed to do. There's things to clean up, and we'll talk about that. But big picture wise, the games that they have been playing, in my opinion, Notre Dame has controlled the games, right? And that's all you can ask for. Yeah, I shouldn't say that. We can ask for plenty, right? We can ask for 50 points a game, and we can ask for a lot of stuff. But Notre Dame has controlled the games that they have been in, and I think that's an important piece of this. When the game is on the line, the offense scores 3 consecutive drives, right? I mean, that's what I saw. And they would have scored on the first drive if it wasn't for a very, very bad decision to throw that ball where he threw it and the interception, obviously. But they were moving the football. They would have scored on that drive, okay? Bad decision. You had to make up for it. Obviously, defense bailed them out, et cetera, et cetera. But bad decision. Bad decision. But my takeaway is Notre Dame is doing what they need to do to win these games. They've got a completely different opponent next week, which is going to be fun to talk about all week. And then obviously watching that game as well on Saturday. So look, Notre Dame, they win 31-13, controlled the game. Good win for the Irish. Those are our gut reactions on this one. We're going to jump into the offense and defense here in just a second, but make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And, while you're over there on the podcast side, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review. We'd like that. That'd be great. And of course, jump on the boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com. All the good stuff is over there. There's going to be breakdowns of this game over there, film breakdowns. If anybody's on the boards, if you're on the boards already, you know what kind of amazingness is over there with the video breakdowns and the RPO breakdowns and everything else that Brian has put over there on the board. So make sure you get over there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, fellas, let's jump into this thing a little bit deeper. Let's talk about the offense and what they were able to accomplish today. 24 points on the board offensively, missed a field goal towards the end, but then the defense picks them up and scores a touchdown. But 24 offensive points scored in this one, which is obviously more than enough when it mattered. Georgia Tech scores 7. Thoughts on the offense overall, and we'll kind of go front to back, kind of like we do with the defense. Give me your thoughts overall, and then we'll kind of break it down position by position. So let's go the opposite way. Ryan, thoughts on the offense today?
Thoughts on the offense today. I think that they hit a nice rhythm in I think it was the second or third drive that kind of went through the rest of the first half. And I thought that when they hit the rhythm, looks great, man. The ball was coming out of Riley Leonard's hand fast. I think that they start to show that they understood how to manipulate space. I mean, I saw Chris Mitchell catch a pass and make someone miss in space. I saw Jeremiah Love catch 3 passes for 57 yards today, right? So I think you did a better job today of getting your guys in space, which is something that I've just continuously, because we all know the thing that people talk about constantly is Notre Dame doesn't have speed. Well, today I saw some speed on the field. I did, just flat out after catch ability to make people miss. I saw that overall. I think that for me, you are going against a Georgia Tech defense that is pretty good at stopping the run, and they stagnated you on early downs a little bit too much, especially when you're trying to run inside a lot. Because Jeremiah Love, I think, ended with like 36 yards and 13 carries or something like that, 14 carries. So he wasn't incredibly effective as far as efficiency on a snap-to-snap basis, but the upside is great. You still see the flashes of what he's able to do, and obviously the one touchdown that he had was brought back because of a holding penalty as well. So
you add the 57 yards receiving to that as well, as far as for him being in space. And so I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
But yeah, that's important with him specifically, because I think that's what he brings to the table.
I think overall today showed me that Notre Dame is a rhythm-based offense. They are. And when they are working some RPO stuff, when they're working play action, when they're hitting quick game, when they are running the ball efficiently, they're a really good offense, I think, when they're doing those things together. It's just when they get out of rhythm, I think that they struggle a ton. When something happens where they're behind the change, when something happens where they are just not comfortable, they're not an overly efficient offense overall. But I think that we saw that the spurts of really good were really good. It's just we're getting a little bit too much. We're getting the peaks and chasms a little bit, right? The peaks are great. The chasms are too plentiful. I still think Notre Dame has a middle ground of a little bit more consistency that they can find, but they're a little boomer bust offensively right now, for lack of a better term. Like, I just think they're a little bit too up and down. If they find some form of consistency there, then I think they have a chance to be a very good offense.
Sean, you're up.
I'll just add to and get right to Trevor, because I'm sure he's going to break it down a little bit more. But being the middle guy here, in between the guys, it ain't it, man. It's not it. Defense plays too good, too consistent. Marcus Freeman, the anger he showed the last 2 weeks, he's fed up. He doesn't want to hear about practice. He doesn't want to hear about this guy needs to be played this way, or we got to do things this way. Dude, you can tell he's frustrated. They get turnovers. They get turnover on down, short fields. They can't score. Like that, Marcus Freeman is thinking about not Georgia Tech on the other side of the field. He's thinking this is a playoff game. We have to get this offense to a point that no matter who we play, we operate at this level. And he's fed up because they can't do it consistently. Whether it's play calling, questionable play calling, whether it's the offensive line not being consistent enough, you get a touchdown, it's a holding call that there was no need for it. Like, it really had no bearing on whether or not Jeremiah Love was going to bounce to the outside. None at all. You start off, you have inside leverage. The guy is inside of you. Either turn him or move your feet and stay on the outside. You don't. And then you have to end up holding. It's just things like that. It's just always something. It's just always something. When you get the rhythm, like Ryan said, it's something that allows you to be taken out of the rhythm. And it's that simple for an offense to be taken out of rhythm, not just for one drive, but for multiple drives in games. For me, I understand the frustration of Marcus Freeman with this offense at this point, because 7 games in? It's like, no, something has to change. The conversations need to be had. We have to find some way, now that we know who we are, to become more consistent at doing things right. Because he's frustrated, because if he knows it falls at his feet, he's the head coach. So no matter what happens, it comes back to him. And he's frustrated. I'm sure fans are frustrated. It's not about nitpicking. Yeah, they won. It's Georgia Tech. We expected them to win. They were favored by 13, 14 points. Like, let's not overthink this. Yes, we're happy about the win. But Marcus Freeman constantly harps on process. Forget the result. He's not happy with the process. He's not. And that offensively is something that should be pointed out. So I decided to be the bad guy. There you go, Trevor.
Trevor, before you hop in, can I just say off of that, Sean, I think that the offense is a lot more mentally fragile than what the defense is, right? Like, I think the defense, when something comes bad, they come back and they make a play, right? And they kind of settle back in overall. I think the offense, when they're rolling good, again, I think they're very good when they're rolling good. The problem is that when something bad happens, an interception, a fumble, a penalty, it just seems like they just kind of like get all tights, right? And like they're afraid to make another mistake because it'll roll downhill at that point. So I think it's just like, I almost think it's a mental block at times, man. Like it seemed like, after a holding call, you just kind of get into that zone of like, I have to be perfect. And then I make more mistakes overall, right? You throw an interception, you get a little gun shy at times, even though that didn't really happen today overall. I mean, Riley Leonard ended up being like 14 of 16 in the first half, and one of them was interception. That was the incompletion. But just for argument's sake, I mean, the fumble with Jadarian Price a couple weeks ago that we talked about a ton, right? Like he fumbled the ball, you're rolling along good, you fumble the ball, and then you're all out of sorts mentally, right? I just think that this offense needs maturing mentally, because negativity, things to get in their way, built, the stumbling blocks along the way, I feel like they set them back multiple steps when you should only be one step, and then you're back to firing. And I just think that they don't recover well enough mentally, if that makes sense.
The offense was weird for me today. Like, offense, play calling. I'll go like position by position and then just kind of like overarching. One, for the people that don't want to hear it, like Riley Leonard, he started the game 2 of 4 for 8 yards with a pick, a bad interception. Like, let's just all agree that was a bad pick, bad decision. That was a bad ball. Like, I'm not here to try to say, well, maybe if this guy, no, it was a bad ball. It's a bad decision. And I think he locked onto his first read, and that's what it was. I don't know if he was just told, hey, we're taking a shot to Collins on this play, but you have to have the wherewithal. It's like, hey, he's in double coverage with the safety over top. That's just not the throw that you make there, right? After he did that, he went 12 of 12 for 164 yards and had 2 rushing touchdowns. He recovered. Like I said, the biggest takeaway was resiliency for me. Now, then as the game started to progress, once you get into the second half, you start out and you go on a 6-play, 64-yard touchdown drive. Fantastic. Then the inconsistencies kind of started coming back again in the passing game. Like, it was a little weird. There were some misses. There were like easy misses, right? There were a couple like late in the fourth quarter after they ran the fake field goal. First play was supposed to be a deep in route, I think, to Jaden Thomas, and he drove it straight into the ground. It's things like that, to Sean's point, that need cleaned up if you are going to perform and be considered a postseason team, right? Notre Dame is regarded as, as we all know, they're probably going to get into the postseason now because of what the statistics tell us on ESPN. But in order to do that, and if you want to be successful once that gets there, there are things that you have to clean up offensively. Right? The running back room, Brian and I talked about this in the keys to victory. Somebody on that team has to step up and say, like, when the game's on the line, or not even when it's on the line, when you just need a jump start or something, you need somebody on that team to be like, yo, get me the ball, get me the football. And luckily for Notre Dame right now, it's their 3 top running backs. It's Jeremiah Love, it's Jadarian Price, and it's Aeneas Williams, are 3 guys who say, like, hey, stuff's not working right now. Get me the football. I will just make something happen. Jadarian Price ended today with 8.6 yards per carry. Can't be mad at that. Jeremiah Love ended the day with 93 total yards of offense and a touchdown. Aeneas Williams in the red zone in the first half had a really good run after the catch. Really good run after the catch. So there was a lot of positives that came out of the running back room today. There were some misreads on some zone runs. Now, like schematically, like big picture, would have liked to see a little bit more creativity in the run game instead of just running into the teeth of the Georgia Tech defense. But I'm sure that's a conversation that Brian and Vince will be having on Monday upon further review. Hate to spoil it for anybody, but that's, running backs as a whole, though, they are the dudes of the offense right now. They are the guys that, when something needs to happen, get them the football.
Good job, nice. Trevor. Now Vincent needs to cut that out of the schedule on Monday, man.
I know, man. I know. I messed it up for him. But wide receivers as a whole, it was an interesting game. Like, nobody that I saw just going through and watching the game initially made some big blundering mistake. Like, no wide receiver fumbled the football. There was no like blatant drop. But I'm sure there are things that I missed just after watching it through on the live broadcast. But as a whole, I think the wide receivers played fine. It was nice to see, Sean brought it up, it was nice to see Mitchell Evans get back into the rotation a little bit. And then offensive line play was just pass pro in the second half just essentially left. I don't really know what happened. I don't know what changed. Leonard was getting pressured right up the middle. There was a lot of things that need correcting on that front. From a play calling big picture standpoint, this is the part that I don't quite understand. Notre Dame in multiple games has shown that they have the ability to drive down and put together multiple scoring drives in a row. You saw that against Louisville. They rattled off 21 first quarter points. And today, after the first 1 or 2 drives where there was an offensive sputter, they go and they score 24 unanswered points. The frustrating thing for me is when you pick and choose when to be aggressive with that. That is the part that I don't understand. Notre Dame's offense has shown that they can. And now there are things like when you get behind the sticks, to Ryan's point, this offense starts to sputter. When essentially the second you get knocked off schedule, there's a lot of questions around, all right, well, what are they going to do on 2nd and 10? Right? But it was weird watching them be very picky and choosy on when they wanted to be aggressive. You run a fake punt, and then the first offensive play you run after that's inside zone. I don't really understand that. I don't. If you're going to, this is Notre Dame and we're going to be aggressive and you're going to run a fake punt to keep the drive alive, I don't know why you follow that out with the most vanilla play call in your playbook. It's things like that I think just need correcting, to Sean's point. But offensive takeaways, those are mine.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think everything you guys said is spot on. I think the word that just keeps rattling around in my brain when I think about the offense today and really the offense all season is just consistency. Like there are drives where they just look like a polished offense where they're just calling what they need to call to keep the defense off balance. They're out leveraging defenses. They're, running one way, throwing a screen to the other way. They're, the RPO game is on fire. The running backs are running hard, running over guys. There's holes, whether it's inside, whether it's outside. And then they have 3 and outs where they look lost or they there's a critical hold or, something along those lines. And to Trevor's point, when they're at times when you think that they should be doing one thing and then they just run it up the middle and you're like, really? Like that's what we got here? I think that part's frustrating. So it's a consistency thing for me. And it's not just the players. It's also the play calling. And it's also the offensive philosophy. I think that is the directive at times, from the top. And we've talked about that. I'm not going to get super deep into that big of a picture idea because we're talking about this game specifically. But, like I said, they 3 and out to start the game. Then they're moving the football. They throw the pick. Well, it wasn't they. Riley Leonard threw the pick. Bad decision all around. No doubt about it. And then they scored touchdowns on the next 3 drives. And it was with ease. It felt like the play calling was on point. The execution was on point. Like those drives were really fun to watch. And then it was like, well, we're good. Like, and they just kind of, I don't want to say that the play calling just like packed it in because I don't think that was the case. I'm not saying that is the case, because when you look at the drives and the way that they went, right after the last touchdown, they had a punt, then they turned the ball over on downs because they, turned the ball over on downs. Then they kicked the field goal. Then they had a field goal attempt, and then it's the end of the game. So it wasn't like a barren desert of offense by any stretch of the imagination. But it just didn't look smooth to me. It didn't look like it looked in the touchdown drives. You know what I mean? So from a consistency standpoint, that's what I need to see get better across the board. And let's be honest, against, different competition. What I mean by that is their next game is against Navy, where you're not going to have as many possessions. And so you need to be more consistent. You need to take advantage of those opportunities that you have offensively, because you may not get as many opportunities as you want, as you've been able to have in the past, where you're like, well, we'll go 3 and out on the first drive. No big deal. You may not get the ball back to the second quarter. I mean, that's a definite possibility when you run against an offense like this. And with the way that the defense has played early in games, they kind of give up some yards. They give up some points. They give up plays early in games. And so the last thing you want to do is, if you receive the ball, go 3 and out, give the ball to Navy, let them matriculate the ball down the field, take 8, 9, 10 minutes off the clock, put a touchdown on the board. And all of a sudden you're like, we're staring the second quarter right in the face. It's time to turn it on offensively. Then you start pressing, et cetera. So the offense needs to start much faster than they have, and they need to be more consistent. That's my biggest takeaway from the offense in this one, fellas. And, hopefully they can get it, because we can see it. You can see it's not like we're not seeing the offense be successful. I think that is even more frustrating when you're a fan, right? It's one thing if your offense just isn't good, right? If they're just not good. But we've seen them be good, and they just need to be good more often and more consistently. So, fellas, let's jump into it specifically. We'll start at the front, offensive line. This is a tough one to talk about, in a situation like this, because for me personally, offensive line is where I need to look back on the film and really kind of focus on the fellas up front. We've kind of discussed Anthony Knapp, critical holding penalty on the touchdown, things of that nature. But anything stand out to you? And I'll kind of throw this out to the room. Anything stand out to you guys from an offensive line standpoint? And then we'll work to the skill guys.
I mean, it left a lot to be desired, in my opinion, right? Like, I mean, obviously Anthony Knapp had the holding call. I mean, overall, I didn't really notice him the rest of the day, other than maybe like another time. So, like, I didn't think he played awful, like the chat is going to suggest here, right? But like, it was a bad holding call on the
Yeah.
Love touchdown that
It
would
was.
have obviously helped to ice the game a little bit more than it was already iced at that point. I thought the interior offensive line really struggled with Zeke Biggers, big number 88, the nose. I thought they had no answers for that fella. Emil Wagner had one nice play out in space, and it seemed like I didn't notice him at all. So I'm going to say that Emil Wagner seemed like he had a solid game, but thought the interior struggled. And Anthony Knapp had his 1 to 2 plays of freshman ball today, which, stifled the offense and kind of hurt that momentum and that consistency that we're talking about a little bit. So thought it was, the kind of the same old that we've seen from Anthony Knapp, some good, but a couple plays, they're just a little bit of blunderous, freshman mistakes. And the interior offensive line, I thought, really struggled against that front.
I don't know what much you can really expect. I just think, I'm looking forward to seeing Brian and Vince really break down the offensive line play because there are so many things that go into it. And I think the offensive line has to be cohesive. They have to work together. But then the quarterback and how he sees things and his cadence and, this is like the third straight team that just brings the safety down off the edge, like time in Riley Leonard's cadence. And like he doesn't change. He doesn't switch it up. He does nothing. It's like that's just the nuance of the quarterback position and how you can help the offensive line, right? And it just wrecks the backside of the cutback ability for the running backs. And it didn't make a difference because even though that back edge was coming, Biggers was just wrecking the interior.
Oh,
and there was nothing.
He was good tonight. I mean, look, he played well tonight. Right? I mean, didn't he? I mean, sometimes you got to tip your cap, right? Like he played well.
Yeah, but for me, you have to help the offensive line. I would have loved to see more of the quick screen game. If you're going to be coming hard off the edge like that, they did a good job of out leveraging Georgia Tech from a schematic standpoint early when they got into a rhythm, and then they went to the quick slant game. They got to that a little bit. And then it's almost like they tried to stay spread out instead of getting back to what got them to that point. Like, this is what got you to that point, right? And now you can go spread things out, get to the quick slants, get to some other things. But always make sure you come back to what is the foundation and the root of your offense and then continue to build on that, add to it. And I think that's one of the things they really need to do to help the offensive. This is not an offensive line that can consistently pass pro, with 11,
Right.
10. They can't do that. Maybe 1 or 2 plays here and then get back to what you do best. But to get into a part of the game where you feel like you can do that, I understand taking the shot after a turnover or something like that. But now, because you're not a rhythmic offense quite yet consistently, you put yourself in second and long. And Santucci, anytime they got the second and long, here he comes with the exotic blitz, the run blitzes, because he expects that now you're going to try to get 4 and 5 yards to get yourself in third and manageable. And so these are the things from a play calling standpoint that I think you can start to think about, help the offensive line. This is the issue. We hope and we can say reps are going to make them better. You can only get better with reps. Yeah, but you need some good reps. Like you can't get better with bad reps. And when we watch certain players, we see the same mistakes over and over again. And obviously, there is no progression. So now we have to question, okay, what else can we expect from this offensive line? We expect Billy Shroud to come back and solidify the right side a little bit more and probably help out the center play a little bit more. But you're still going to have 2 youngsters on the left side that are inconsistent and one probably a little bit more inconsistent. That's the most important position in pass pro, to get your quarterback comfortable, and you're trying to get him to a point to be comfortable. So it's spotty right now, but I don't know what answers exist. I really don't. And I'm being objective here. Like I keep hearing they'll get better with reps. but they've had 7 games of reps. So at which point does that kind of level off, right? Because I know in basketball terms, it's college basketball, but they say once you reach the 20 game point, you're no longer a freshman. Like, you're not a freshman anymore. You've been through half the conference season, and what's that point in college football? At which point where do you get enough reps and enough playing time to say, okay, that freshman thing? No, like, that consistency has to show up. It has to, and that for me is what I'm going to be looking for with Nathan, which is probably going to be a much smaller front, but the same type of mentality, right? Blitzes, pressure, run blitzes. That's why I said this is probably a really good scrimmage type game or preparation game offensively and defensively for what they're going to see against Navy. But the offensive line has to be much more disciplined. They have to be much more disciplined. If you get beat, get beat. But it should be certain mistakes that you just refuse to make as an offensive line at this point. It's just certain things. I'm not going to get beat to my inside as a tackle right now. If a guy just beats me with athleticism around the edge, I have an athletic quarterback that I trust can step up into the pocket and take off. You're not beating me to my inside. I'm not falling for spin moves. No, you're going to have to beat me around the edge. That's where it should be at this point. These are my foundational things. This is my focus. This is what I'm going to do. I know who I am. And if we can get everybody to operate at that level and just be consistent, I think the offensive line can be a good offensive line. I don't think they have the talent to be anything more than a good, maybe a slightly better than good offensive line right now. And if we're expecting them to like improve to like some really good elite offensive line, I think we might be asking a little bit too much, honestly. We just need consistency of whoever they are, wherever they reside from a talent standpoint, just be consistent as an offensive line and play together and be tough and compete. That's it. If we can get that, Notre Dame's going to be just fine.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think they can be a great offensive line, but I think it's in 2025, not in 2024, that they have that upside to them. Because I push back on like a few things that people say ultimately, right? If Notre Dame wanted to go from Anthony Knapp to Gerby Lambert, let's say, just in a vacuum, I'd be fine with it ultimately, because yes, you would upgrade the talent, but if you did that, you would still get the same freshman mistakes, guys. Like, you're still gonna be wondering, like, oh, why did Gerby hold on that play? Why did Gerby misstep on that play? It's because they're freshmen. They shouldn't be playing right now. They just shouldn't be playing right now. And ultimately, I think the loss of Ashton Craig, although Pat Coogan's done a solid job, like, that stagnated you a little bit, right? It did. And we didn't talk about it a ton because Pat Coogan's doing the best he can, and he's had okay weeks, but I mean, I think we saw today, like, you just don't have the explosiveness and pop off the football as you would with an Ashton Craig overall. So I agree, Sean. Like, I think that this team needs to be a little bit more assignment sound and consistent, and that could be good enough in most cases. But if we're expecting this team to be a great offensive line this year, I just don't see that happening. Like, you just hope that they're solid, right? Like, solid would be acceptable. They're just, sometimes they're solid, sometimes they're below average. You hope that you can hit that ceiling of solid in 2024, and then 2025, when Charles Jagusah is fully healthy, when Gerby Lambert has a year under his belt now, when you have Anthony Knapp with another year under his belt, when you have Emil Wagner with a full year of starting, when you have Ashton Craig, when you have Billy Schroff, that's when you really take that step forward to being a great offensive line. I just want solid for the rest of the season. Like, solid would be great. I would be okay with solid for now.
Trevor, what say you about the offensive line and how they played in this 31-13 victory?
I think it's weird because I agree with what Sean said. I do, because now we're 7 games into the season, right? And so this hope of, but next week when they come out, they're just going to be a dominant force. Like, I do believe that this is the offensive line that Notre Dame is just going to have, give or take, cleaning up a few mistakes, like that holding call, like that Anthony Knapp had, which was a clear hold. That is something I do believe that you can clean up. I genuinely believe that. I do. But on the flip side of this coin, right, is Notre Dame's offensive line did not play well, and they rattled off 24 straight unanswered points on offense. So, like, it's just, that's why I said it's a weird feeling to have, because they nowhere near came close to playing to the level of expectation at a school that is referred to as O-line U. And there are still moments where they do shine and they show some of that potential that Ryan talked about that you are going to see on full display in 2025. I think that there's things that could be done schematically to help out a struggling offensive line. And again, I just don't think running into the teeth of every single defense that you face that's not going to make them look better than what they are. Just my opinion personally. But there's a lot of different things that can be done to help them out. But the thing that I can take away from the offensive line, looking at this game from like a macro view, is I don't think anybody on the offensive line just straight up like quit today. Like I don't, like, at least effort's not an issue. Like if I am looking at their performance as a whole on offense, I don't think it was anything where somebody just didn't look like they wanted to be out there. Vince brought it up. I mean, if Biggers just had a really good game, sometimes you just kind of have to give credit where credit is due. When you play a good football team, other good players will make good plays on that team. Like it just happens, right? So the offensive line struggled today, and they are nowhere near the product that we thought that they were going to be. When you factor in their left tackle is out for the season, their starting center is out for the season, their right guard is still out with a to-be-determined return date. So I think there's a lot of different factors, but I don't think that can take away from they do have to play better. Now, I don't know if that means that they're just going to go through this between the Navy game and this week of practice and the next bye week. They're just going to show this monumental increase in performance, but they do have to get better and find ways to get better. That's my take on the offensive line.
Yeah, no, I think you guys nailed it. I think that they compete every week. They compete like crazy. They play hard. That was an issue in the past for the offensive line. I don't believe that that's an issue this year. We say it every week when we do, upon further review, and even in this show as well. The offensive line competes their butts off. And yes, they make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. But you do see flashes of good O-line play. I mean, there's holes for these running backs to run through, right? I mean, they sometimes they got to get a little skinny to get through there, but there's holes that these guys are running through. Riley Leonard, I think the plays that are being called are in response to how they feel about the offensive line. I think that's a fair statement to make. Quick passes, get the ball out of his hands. People are like, well, Riley Leonard still can't push the ball down the field. Riley Leonard isn't going to be able to just sit in the pocket and wait for a lot of down the field action to open up either. So play calling is adjusting to everything that is happening on the offense. And part of that is the offensive line. Part of that is Riley Leonard as a thrower. Part of that is his comfortability with RPO throws, right? There's all of these things go into it, but offensive line is part of it. I mean, can we at least say that, right? They're competing their butts off in the run game. They do pretty good things in the run game. Yes, the hold by Knapp was bad. We've established that. Just like the interception by Leonard, bad. We've established that. Like, those are really bad plays, right? But man, they're competing. They're doing everything they can. They're firing out. They're doing what they're doing. They're attempting to do what they're being asked to do. And I think we can all agree that Anthony Knapp's playing out of position. He's not a left tackle, right? Does that open up questions as to, is there anybody else that can play that position that's on this roster? I think that's a whole other conversation, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about this game, the guys that played in this game. He competed. I will never say that he doesn't compete, because he absolutely competed. Just made some mistakes because he's not good in space, because that's not who he is. And that's just where we are. Offensive line competes. They give this offense an opportunity to be successful. At this point, we are 7 games into this season. That's what you're going to get from the offensive line. We can hope for incremental steps and getting better at certain things. This is who they are. They can be successful with this offensive line. Again, I go back to my point. They have to be more consistent. So let's talk skill players, and then we will talk quarterback. Let's do that. So so this will lump in pass catchers and running backs. Okay, so let's talk about those guys. I believe it was another crazy number of receivers getting involved in this game. Let me see here. 9 different receivers caught a pass for Notre Dame from Riley Leonard. So of his 20 completions, there were 9 different receivers. So definitely spreading the ball around to many different guys. So thoughts, gentlemen? We'll start with Trevor this time. Thoughts on the skill guys in the offense, how they played today, and that. Just go.
Yeah, I think the ball was facilitated to him pretty well. I mean, if we're talking skill guys as a whole, I think the running back room takes the day. Yeah. Those are just 3 guys that are just, you put in any one of those 3 between Aeneas Williams, Jeremiah Love, and Jadarian Price, and good things are going to happen. It's going to be even better when they get on the field at the same time, but that's, again, another conversation for a different day. But I think the running backs take the day. As far as like the benefit of the skilled players, I think Mitchell Evans, I mean, I don't think he did have the best game that he had all season. Like statistically, he was getting targeted in the offense. He was moving the chains on some plays. I would have liked to see him run routes that were more not 2 yards from the line of scrimmage. But I think that, to your point before, Vince, some of that I think is a byproduct of the amount of time he's able to get in pass protection, right? So, but it was nice to see Mitchell Evans start to come alive. Again, I brought this up a couple weeks ago, but with this elongated playoff, you kind of start thinking about it like, okay, what team is going to start to get hot at the end of October going into November? And if Mitchell Evans is a guy that they can start to unlock and make him a part of the offense, an effective part of the offense, I think that bodes really well for Notre Dame's offense as a whole. Wide receivers, that's the position for me that I have to go back and kind of watch like the all 22 again, because it's hard for me to like watch routes that are like developing downfield while I'm watching the game live. So, but like I said in the beginning, I don't recall them making any big blunders or no crazy drops or anything like that. So I use the all 22 to go back and evaluate route running, things like that. But wide receivers for the day, I think they were fine. I think Riley Leonard did a good job of facilitating the ball out to playmakers, and I think they did a good job when they were in space. I think they did a good job run after the catch when they had the opportunity to. So that's, skill positions, running backs take the day, wide receivers played a fine game, and it was nice to see Mitchell Evans back in the rotation.
With the skill position players, I want to make a statement that I'm very interested in what everyone has to say about it. In football, you can get into a rhythm, and it's good to get the ball to 7 or 8 players, but really good teams have a way to identify these are the 3 or 4 players that they're going to get the bulk of our touches. These are dudes that are going to make our offense go. So now it goes back to rhythm, right? Like, because you're trying to get a rhythm, but you're trying to get a rhythm with 7 to 8 guys touching the ball. It's like that normally doesn't really become a rhythmic offense unless you have a passer and an offensive line that can give you time to really attack teams and play up tempo and do those things. So with Notre Dame, Trevor, like you said, that's a 2-hour podcast. Like finding a way to get Jeremiah and Jadarian on the field at the same time. I mean, sure, let's give all defensive coordinators problems. How about it? Let's just give them something to think about, right? But you see Chris Mitchell, and then you don't see him. Right? You're going to throw deep passes to Bo Collins. Where's the dialed up pass to Chris Mitchell, who's supposed to be the guy that takes the top off the ball? Those are the confusing things from the skill position. I don't know if those things were there. And as Rowley said, he just wasn't throwing it like he said in the press conference. I don't know if that was the case today. But like you said, you have to look at the all 22 to see what was really there. I like getting Mitchell Evans out in space, getting him involved. But heck, can we have a tight end actually attack the middle of the field? At some point, stretch the seam, even if it's just to get the safety to go with him and get someone coming underneath on a dig or over something. But then I say all of that, and it all goes back to the offensive line being able to give time for those routes to develop. Right? So, at the end of the day, it is so nuanced that we can talk about one thing, but it really connects to something else. And unless you look at the collective to get a full picture of what's really going on, the most you can say is, the skill position players, for the most part, when they had the opportunity to make plays, they made the plays. They didn't drop balls. They looked like they ran some solid routes. And other than that, I don't know what else we can really say. Of course, we know our running backs are excellent. They're elite, premier. They are, right? But do you overdo it? I think, because I would love to see a 3 running back rotation. Me personally. I'm fine with the top 3 running backs being the guys to get on the field. Unless we're blowing a team out. I'm fine with that. They love to play all their running backs, and that's fine as well. But I want my best players touching the ball more than often in a game, especially if I'm going to have limited possessions in a game. I need my top guys touching the ball. And there are certain games where you can say, oh, yeah, let's spread the ball around. There's certain games where it's like, you know what? We're going to our dogs today. And, man, we're going to feed them all day long. Our top 3 to 4 guys, hey, they're getting it, stop us and find ways to get them open. And we've seen them spread out, but the bunch formations that worked against Louisville and worked against Miami, Ohio, we didn't see much of that today. It's just there's some things that I think schematically that they would love to get to, but I don't know if they trust it right now, because I don't know if they can trust the offensive line. I just don't know. I mean, I'm trusting Mike Denbrock and his wisdom, his experience, that he knows what he wants to do and how he can attack defenses. But I don't know if he has full confidence. Goes back to what Ryan said. It's like, you could be in a rhythm, and then all of a sudden, where does that rhythm go? That's the same thing as a play caller. As a play caller, you have to get into a rhythm, right? So what's being broken from a play caller standpoint when it comes to getting the ball to your playmakers? That's the only thing I can really bring up that I would like to see from my skill position guys, because when they had opportunities to make plays today, they made plays. Jeremiah would have made more plays if he wasn't getting hit 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage when he got the ball. I mean, the kid is just, the little pass he took and just outran the defense. I'm like, this.
And he stiff armed the dude going along the sideline too.
Yeah.
He's an unreal athlete. Yeah.
Man, yeah. Jeremiah and Jadarian, man, they might be the best 1-2, maybe going back to Lou Holtz, maybe the best 1-2 running back combination we've seen since the 90s. They're special. They are that special. I mean, we have to go way back to like Ricky Waters, Rocket, Tony Brooks, all in, and Jerome Bettis as a freshman. That's how far back you have to go, where you're moving all Americans to defensive back when they came to Notre Dame and played running back. That's the last time you've had this type of depth in that running back room with this level of talent. And I would love to see it taken advantage of a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, Sean, I think I hold your frustration there, because I was really encouraged by the athletes being athletes tonight. I mean, I've talked about it as far as like, I thought you got a couple guys in space a few times. That was really encouraging. Jeremiah Love being one of those guys. You even got Mitchell Evans on a little bit of a screen early on in this game. You talked about Chris Mitchell with a yard after catch opportunity in this game as well. So like, you saw the wide receivers make plays. I just think that always my frustration comes back to, I just think that some guys are just used in roles that I just don't understand exactly why that's the role that they're being used in. I mean, like Jeremiah Love, I think is a perfect one, right? Jeremiah Love ended up with 17 touches for 93 yards and a touchdown in this game. It's a solid number on paper, right? But I felt like we just kept seeing the same inside run almost every single running attempt, where I'm just like, why don't I try to get him on the edge? Like you were trying to get Jadarian Price on the edge. Why is Jeremiah Love not being used more on the edge a little bit, right? Because I don't think anybody has any questions of when the skill position talent, and you can include Riley Leonard into this with his ability as a runner, because that is a part of the skill position too. When they are given opportunities to make plays, they made plays tonight. They did when they had opportunities to do what they do well. I just don't know if they're always asked to do exactly what their skill set parlays to being good at overall. Like you mentioned it, Sean, it's like Bo Collins could get deep occasionally. We saw it last week. Like he can do that occasionally, but like Chris Mitchell could run. You got a couple other guys. Jaden Harrison could run. You got a couple other guys that could run a little bit. Like getting those guys involved in the vertical passing game, I think would be very interesting for this offense overall. But again, Bo Collins made some plays when he was asked to. Mitchell Evans made some plays when he was asked to. Jeremiah Love made some plays. Jadarian Price made some plays. Jaden Greyhouse made some plays. So the playmakers had a good game. I think the next step now, if we're talking about things that actually can be fixed before the end of the year, let's finalize these roles, right? Like, how do I want to use Jeremiah Love on a week-to-week basis? How do I want to use Jadarian Price? How do I want to use X, Y, and Z player? Because they have talented skill position players, and they make plays when they're given opportunity to. I just want to see that evolution next step after this of a good performance. I'm now taking the next step of this is what Bo Collins is really good at. Let's make sure he's doing that. Jeremiah Love, same thing, so on and so forth.
Yeah, fellas, I think I think the skill guys did well when given the opportunity to do well. You know, when they got the ball in space, they made plays. When there were holes, the running backs made plays. Even when there wasn't holes, the running backs made plays, right? I think that, you know, the wide receiver core, I agree with you guys. Sometimes I don't think that they're used necessarily for the skill sets that I think that they have and the way we thought that they probably should be used, you know, going into the season and, you know, things like that. It's very obvious that Bo Collins is the go-to guy, whether that's because Riley Leonard thinks he's the go-to guy or Mike Denbrock thinks he's the go-to guy. He's the go-to guy in this offense. I mean, it's very, very clear. You know, Mitchell Evans was the go-to guy last year until he got hurt, and now he's kind of an afterthought. I agree with Sean. I like the fact that they kind of had a concerted effort to get him more involved, but of course I would rather see him get more throws downfield as well. I mentioned that there were 9 different pass catchers, and it's interesting that you bring up, Sean, where that's great that they're spreading the ball around. Sometimes you just got to give it to your dudes. That's a really good point that I hadn't really thought about. A lot of times I think about, you know, hey, they're spreading it around. It's good. Like they're getting more guys involved. They're keeping the defense guessing. But Notre Dame has some dudes that you would like to see that get the ball more often as well. Like we would love, yes, look, Jeremiah Love had 17 touches. Watching that game, did it feel like he had 17 touches in that game? Like it didn't feel that way to me. Like I still feel like he needs more. And I feel like Jadarian Price needs more. You know what I mean? Because those are the dudes in your offense. Like get the dudes the football and do it in a creative way, right? I'm still waiting, and I saw this in the chat, so I don't want to steal somebody's thunder, but why have we not seen those guys on the field in 21 personnel? It's always like somebody else in there with one of the two of them. You know what I mean? Like, why would you not want your 2 most impactful guys on the field at the same time? With that said, these guys all made plays when they got the football in their hand. So, you know, I can't be upset with the way that the skill guys played. They can only play as well as they can play when the ball's in their hand. I also, by the way, and you see it week in and week out, but I feel like I have to highlight it. Jeremiah Love in space blocking and his willingness to do so is amazing. Look, he is arguably the most versatile guy on this offense. And he is totally willing and really good at blocking guys either as a lead blocker, like between the tackles, just trying to blow somebody up in the hole, or in space, because that's not an easy block, by the way, when you're coming full force at a guy in space and to latch on long enough to get Riley Leonard or whoever else to get past you. I give him a ton of credit for the way he blocks guys as well as the way he runs the football or catches the football or whatever. He's impactful in the run game when he's a blocker. I got to give him a lot of credit for that.
Well, and Vince, I think to work off of that too, because yes, great blocker. I think kind of circling back to just kind of the usage of guys a little bit. I don't think it's the amount of touches. Like 17 touches for Jeremiah Love in a vacuum is a good number. I'm good with 17. I think it's the type of touches, right? Like how they're getting the football. That's more than anything. Like 3, I think Jaden Greyhouse had like 3 catches, right? Like Bo Collins had 5. Again,
So.
not awful numbers, but it's the type of touches they're getting is more than anything for me. Like 17 touches for Jeremiah Love should go for more than 93 yards. Just should go for more than 93 yards. And I think that basically it's just, I'm circling back to, it's not the usage of guys. Like 9 guys caught the football tonight. That's awesome. But are you asking those 9 players that touch the football in the passing game to do what they do best? Are you asking Jeremiah Love to do what he does best? Those are my questions I'd always come back to a little bit.
Yeah, certain people that line up in the slot, and I'm like, yeah, when you see certain alignments, certain wide receivers to the same side, there's no vertical threat. The defense knows there's no vertical threat in the passing game. You know this. We know this as fans. So now you're limiting the passing game. You're literally not threatening the safeties. They can get involved if it's a draw, the lead, whatever you do. You're bringing everybody down into a smaller box. So that, for me, it's like, look, you have to find a way to threaten people. You can't put 3 receivers out there that don't have a vertical threat or the speed to threaten the defense. Somebody has to be out there to make the safeties think. Someone. And schematically, that's, to me, that's you're hurting Riley Leonard, honestly, and what he brings to the table. You're hurting him. And if there's a such phrase as wasted touches, Jeremiah Love has wasted touches every game. Just based upon what you're just gonna, every time he runs, you're gonna run him to the middle of the defense. And you see every time the most creative touch was on a fake field goal. The most creative touch for Jeremiah Love was on a fake field goal today.
That was pretty damn cool, though. That was pretty
creative.
Damn cool. That was a cool play.
It was a cool play, but it's like, what happened to the Aeneas got held up? It was just a really good call because they blitzed to the Georgia Tech blitzed to the screen side. They were trying to set the screen up to Aeneas Williams. If he could have filtered through the traffic, he probably would have had a big play because the two linemen were coming out. But where's the screen game when Jeremiah's in the game? Where is the misdirection when Jeremiah's in the game? Where is using Riley off of Jeremiah and the defense flowing to him and the threat of him in the running game and bringing the backside tight end across the middle? Where are these things that are like, dude, plays on Madden, like the basic plays on Madden that can affect teams? And it's like, we're just not seeing it. That's what I mean. Like, 9 guys is fine. You can devastate a defense with 4 to 5 guys. You don't need 9 guys to touch the ball. If you have 4 to 5 guys and you know how to put them in position consistently and work off of that and get the defense to react and then counter their reaction, you can use those 4 to 5 guys getting the ball to devastate defenses. But once again, we're talking about in the perfect world because there are so many different other areas that impact. I would love to see Jaden Greathouse run over routes. It's something he does really good. It's something he did really good from the first game he played against Navy, right? The slot fade, back shoulder something. We saw that today. He does that really good. Can I see it more than once? Can I see it with motion into it? Can I see it with different variations? Those are the things when I say get the ball to your playmaker. You have to find different ways to get the ball to your playmakers in different looks, different counters, and it can be done. That's it. It can be done. And you have a plethora. You have 4 to 5 guys. I literally, ladies and gentlemen, we watched one guy for years at the tight end position at Notre Dame make it easier on everybody else. Literally, Michael Mayer made it. If they double team, triple team this dude, and if a quarterback was accurate, he was going to have a good day because the wide receiver is going to be one-on-one and the running backs are going to have some room to run. It is, you have to use what you have to impact the defense and put them on their heels. I don't think we're doing it enough, right? I don't think we're putting our best players in the best position on a consistent basis. And that goes to the rhythm that you talked about. That's something we saw Georgia Tech did it early, right? It might have been the only chance they had today. We're just going to play one-on-one football. We're going to get the ball to Haynes in the flat. We're going to get the ball to our wide receivers, quick stuff, reverses, just like, and Notre Dame adjusted. And once Notre Dame adjusted, they didn't have anything else, right? Because they just weren't talented enough. Notre Dame is talented enough to be able to play one-on-one football. They're talented enough to get the ball to their guys in space and make plays. Mitchell Evans was bullying the safety out in space. He was catching 4-yard passes, dragging them 4 yards. You went to it a couple of times, and then we never saw it again. You just never saw it again. It's like, wear it out. Until they stop it, wear it out. And when they finally stop it or adjust to it, now let's go to the next playmaker that we have on the field. Maybe I'm simplifying it too much, but the game for me is just that simple because I see too many teams that have a dominant player or have playmakers play that way. It's like, it's wonderful. You're not throwing the ball around to 8 to 9 guys against elite defenses. You're not doing that. You're not doing that. If you don't have a dude, if you don't have some go-to guys to say, yo, this is who we're getting the ball to, we're going to find a way to get them the ball, it's not happening, man. It's not whether I don't care if it's football, basketball. You get to the fourth quarter, you run all the plays you run. Either you have a guy that's bringing it home or you don't. Either you have a quarterback and some skilled players that are going to bring it home or you don't. That's it. All the scheme, the schemes, the coaches have seen everything on both sides when it gets late in the game. Now it's up to dudes making plays. That's in every sport. A defensive lineman making a play, a safety making a play, somebody on either side of the ball is going to make a play late in the game. And that's that. And it sounds wonderful. 8 receivers caught the ball, 9 receivers caught the ball. All right, when you face a secondary that's just as good as Notre Dame's secondary, that's not happening. Now what do? That's the question for these skill positions. That's the question for these skill position players. We have to get them in. We asked the same question. We said the same thing for Riley Leonard the entire first 5 games. We have to put him in a position to play his best, right? That's what we said. We have to put Riley Leonard in a position to play his game. And we didn't do that. We didn't feel like we were doing that. Well, we have to put our skill position players in a position to do what they do best because they have not been doing that consistently. And that's just my opinion on it. But the skill position players have been, other than, Bo Collins had a bad game. The drop passes, 2 bad games of drop passes, right? And then here, Jaden Greathouse. Jaden Greathouse had a couple of games where he dropped some balls. But things like, everybody's going to have games where they're not playing better. Xavier Watts missed a tackle early in the game that allowed a first down that led to a touch. Like, even your best players are going to have plays that mistakes are made, drop balls, miss assignments. They blew a coverage for the. We got dudes. That's all. We got dudes.
No, absolutely. Let's shift over to the play of Riley. Trevor, I'm going to let you kind of kick this one off. Let's talk about Riley Leonard as another 200-plus game through the air. Had a bad pick, was dynamic on the ground, scored a couple touchdowns there. Your thoughts on Riley Leonard and, kind of his progression as the season goes on as well, outside of this actual game itself. So just kind of give me your thoughts on Riley and what you think, how he looked today.
Yeah, I said it when we kicked off the offensive show, right? It was resilient. Like it would have been really easy today for Riley Leonard to have just packed it in and been like, well, this is what everybody says that I am. Here we go. And then after he threw a really bad interception, he went out and, like I said, he went 12 of 12 for 162 yards and scored 2 touchdowns on the ground and went back to what he was really good at doing.
Right.
And that's something that I'm always going to be happy with. Like, was it his best performance ever today? No, it wasn't. And Notre Dame still rattled off 24 straight points offensively. And that's something that I can sleep well at night with. Like, Look, guys, if by now we haven't figured out that Riley Leonard is just not the quarterback that's going to go out and go 32 of 36 for 385 yards and 4 touchdowns every single game, and then every single game we're upset that he doesn't, we're just not watching the same football team. But what he is doing and what he is good at is effective within the confines of this offense with some of the limitations that they have, right? I think that to me shows a lot of, you know what, like maybe it's a conversation of, you know, Riley Leonard might not be the guy that Mike Denbrock or Marcus Freeman thought he was going to be at the start of the year, but he is like what they are able to do with him now is still effective, right? Like they have rattled off 5 straight wins with this style of play. And I think that's something that cannot be overlooked. Right? Like it would have been really easy for the demeanor to go down. I'm a big body language guy when I watch the game. Like I think that will tell you a lot about a football team and how somebody's going to perform. And I think that it's just, it would have been so easy for him to come back to the sideline, hang his head. It's like, here we go. And he didn't do that. And for a quarterback, especially, it's really hard to overcome doing because you see the domino effect with so many other quarterbacks, and he didn't let that affect him today against a good Georgia Tech team. In a road environment, in an NFL stadium. So I think that he played a good game today, man. I mean, was it perfect? No, it wasn't. But I think that he is still showing progress as a passer. I think the interception that he threw to Bo Collins is unfortunately going to overshadow a really good back shoulder slot fade that he threw to Jaden Greathouse. That was a really good football. Really good football. So, yeah, I think he was doing necessary things. The dude is money on slant routes. Legit, like in the middle, in the teeth of the defense. Like he's putting it on the numbers right where it needs to be, which, if I remember correctly, are things that people told me that he couldn't do after week 2. And I am actively watching him do it multiple times a week. So I'm really, really happy with what Riley Leonard did today post the interception because he went out and was an effective passer and then got back down into the red zone and did what he did best, and he used his legs.
Yeah. Well, I think this is what people need to understand, right? This is who Riley Leonard is. This is when he's going to be at his best, is when he can throw the ball the way that he's good at throwing the ball and the way he can use his legs the way he's good at using his legs. That is who Riley Leonard is. 200 yards a game through the air, that's a great day for him, right? Because as long as it's complemented by 50-plus yards on the ground and a couple scores, like that is who he is. Because at the end of the day, what do I want from my quarterback? I want him leading touchdown drives. That's what I want, right? And we've talked about this ad nauseum, every single game up to this point. What do we want from an offense? You want them to score touchdowns. Notre Dame scores touchdowns when Riley Leonard is at the helm the past X amount of games, right? And that's what we're seeing from this offense. He's not going to be Quinn Ewers. He's not going to be the guy who sits in the pocket and picks you apart with his arm. But here's the other thing, guys. Newsflash. I don't think he has the guys around him to do that as far as like the offensive line and things like that. That's just not the game plan that is going to win games for Notre Dame. And that's not being negative about the offensive line. That's being realistic about where they are because they have 3 starters that are not playing. 3 out of 5. That's 60% of your offensive line that you anticipated was going to be playing at this time of the year. They're not playing. Okay. And when you lose 60% of your starters from a position group, that's a lot of guys. And they are having to game plan around that. Those guys are battling their butts off. They're doing great with who they are. But you have to game plan around it. Look, somebody said in the chat earlier that, they had 20 plus, what was it? I want to be specific here. I don't want to be wrong. So Riley Leonard dropped back 29 times or to throw the ball 29 times, and he got sacked 0 times. Is that a true fact? Yes. Is it also true that he's really good at escaping pressure? And there was at least one that I can think of that he should have been sacked. And I have no idea how he got out of it and spun around and did what he does, right? And so he's really good at helping out his offensive line with his legs, and they are doing what they need to do to make him successful as well. I completely agree with you, Trevor. The slant game is on point. he's getting the ball out, 1, 2, 3, boom. He's seeing the field so much better than he was early on in the season. And I think his comfortability in this offense, because the offensive line is what the offensive line is. And it felt like early he didn't trust kind of what was in front of him. He was always kind of looking down at the offensive line and bailing and things like that. But I think where Notre Dame is now, I think Riley Leonard has come to the conclusion like, okay, this is who we are. This is who we need to be. I'm going to be confident in what I'm seeing and what I'm doing because Mike Denbrock has my back with the way we're calling things. I don't have to worry about what's happening in front of me. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to be successful. And so I think he played like if this is going to be a scale, right? And you had like the where you want him in the green, right? And if he was really bad, that he'd be in the red or whatever. He's in the green area. Like he played his game. It was an effective game plan for Riley Leonard. I was happy with the way he played. There are definitely some things that you want him to clean up. Can't make that throw for that interception. Tip your cap to Georgia Tech. They had Bo Collins bracketed, and that kid made a really nice play, by the way, for a safety over the shoulder, catching that interception. That was a nice play. Can't make that throw. Can't do that, right? But then he led all of the the next 3 drives, all touchdowns. So at the end of the day, I need my quarterback to lead my team on offensive touchdown drives, and that's what he did. I think he played fine.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to make it sound like we're talking about like a backup that came in and just kind of like managed the game from really the second drive of the game where they went down 15 plays, 75 yards for a touchdown and scored up until they really had him stop passing getting into the fourth quarter. He was an effective passer. It's not like he came in and played well for a guy that's, not known for a passer. Like he was pushing the ball down the field. He was hitting people on the numbers. Like whenever a quarterback goes, 12 for 12, 14 or 14 or whatever he went after the interception, like that's something that can't be overlooked. He was an effective passer in today's game. So I can't say it enough. Like Riley Leonard played well today outside of 1 to 2 bad plays, which you will have. You're just going to have.
No quarterback is perfect, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? You're not going to have perfect play out of a quarterback. And again, you can't take plays away. You take back that one bad decision on the pick, we're having a different conversation because I know people are kind of fixated on the pick. Go ahead, Ryan. What do you got, buddy?
This is a very strange phenomenon for me. I feel like I'm the negative Riley Leonard person on the staff today, which is kind of weird. I don't know. I thought he was fine. He was okay. I don't know. Like I honestly left this game thinking there was more meat on the bone with Riley Leonard, to be honest. I thought that the interception was bad. We've talked about that a ton already. I thought that he got into a really nice groove down the stretch of the first half and into the third quarter. But then I thought after that, and there's going to be reasons for it, right? The offensive line had a couple miscues and maybe a couple bad play calls. Like all those things are a part of it, but I thought there were a couple inaccurate passes. I felt like there was a couple of times when he was a little bit gun shy at the end. So I felt like there was like waves of Riley Leonard in this game, in my opinion. Just personally, I thought that bad early starts, great in like the second quarter and into the third quarter, and then I thought it was just kind of okay the rest of the game. So for me, I thought it was positive in the sense of Riley Leonard went 20 out of 29 for over 200 something yards and had multiple touchdowns. And I thought he could have played better, right? Like that was my biggest takeaway from this game was I thought there was more meat on the bone and his stats on paper weren't bad, right? Which is a good thing ultimately. So I think that there was progress in the sense of we are starting to see a okay performance that we still think that he could be better. And it's still on paper, at least in a box score, one of his better performances of the season so far, 20 out of 29. So I thought there was good. I thought there was uneven. I thought there was one really bad, but I thought that overall it was a fine day for Riley Leonard, but he could certainly still get better without question.
I just like his response to the interception though, too. Right. Yeah. I mean, you can at least appreciate that, right? 14 straight completions after that interception. I mean, there was definite opportunity for him to just be like, well, it's not going to be my day. The only thing I'm going to be able to do is run the ball. And so I'm just going to kind of tuck it and go and, that kind of a deal. 14 straight completions. You know what I mean? And so I was I was very happy to see that. And of course, that coincided with 3 straight touchdown drives too, right? So the response, I think, is as important as the final tally of stats and all of that. Because I agree with you. On paper, it's a good day for Riley Leonard. It's a good day. Because anybody that asks me, I'll be like, look, if he can throw for 200, run for over 50, get in the end zone or be responsible for at least 2 touchdowns, it's a good day for Riley Leonard, right?
Yep.
And a really bad pick, responded really well. That's what I liked about Riley Leonard in this game. If I could just boil it down to one thing, his response was really positive. And I think that'll be huge because he's going to make mistakes again. And I think earlier on in the season, maybe he doesn't respond as positively. I think that's where I'm at.
Oh, that's very fair. I think that he's a lot more confident today than he was early in the season. There's no doubt. Again, I thought there was a couple unevens early on. Again, the interception obviously being the worst part of it. But I thought when Riley was clicking in the second quarter and into the third, I thought that it was great. I thought it was tremendous. I just thought that he kind of finished just okay to me, like the rest of the day. So I thought we saw a little bit of stages of Riley Leonard, which again, it's positive because it was an overall good performance.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on Riley, Trevor?
Apparently, I'm negative because I think that there was waves in a game of a player's game. Okay, all right, sure. I'm negative. Got it.
Critical. Critical's okay. So let's tack on to the offense here for fun. Let's tack on special teams before we switch it over to the defensive side of the ball. So special teams was actually ended up being kind of a critical side of the ball in this game because of the fakes that they had. We had a punt fake. You had a field goal fake. You had a made field goal. You had a missed field goal. And you had some very less than stellar punting that took place in this game. So I'll let you guys go whichever direction that you want to go with this one. And again, and I'll also add, it took special teams to get Tyler Buckner his first touch of the season, because I know everybody loves to talk about Tyler Buckner in this chat. But, hey, 1 touch, 1 first down, just saying. But, guys, Trevor, I'll let you lead this one off. Special teams, overall thoughts on the way everything went down today with special teams.
Yeah, I think special teams I think they played well. Like the exciting plays were really exciting, right? Like it was a lot of fun. The fake punt was drawn up really well. Love that play design was for Jeremiah Love. Thought that was really creative. I really liked the fake field goal call. I think something that can kind of get overlooked is like what the follow-up was after those 2 plays, right? But nonetheless, it was still a really good choice to be aggressive. I think that the punting, you got to find ways that Vince, I think you brought it up a couple of shows ago, or one of the earlier post game shows, that at some point Notre Dame is going to be in a game where like the field position battle is going to be a factor. Yep. And you got to find a way to have a punter that can pin an opposing team inside of a 20-yard line. Like I'm not asking for the punter to be able to, basically walk out the ball and put it at the 2-yard line. But when you're punting from your own 40, don't get it. Don't punt it to the 26-yard line.
That's a very technical thing, obviously, from a punting standpoint. It's something that punters work on all the time. And it's not like you either have the big boot or you don't, like that kind of a thing. And that is what it is. That's God-given a lot of times, right? But the technical stuff, the people in the punting world call it a flip-flop, all right? That kind of a kick, like you've got to be able to execute that. And I realize that Notre Dame's punter, James Rendell, is new to the punting world. You've got to be able, in that moment, you've got to be able to pin them down deep. Like he had the right spin on it. It came backwards, but it bounced 15 yards, sooner than it needed to. And I know that might be nitpicky, but like you said, Trevor, eventually this is going to come into play. And it's going to be very important that they execute that. And they just weren't good at it today. Just weren't good at it at all.
Man, flip-flops, huh?
Flip-flop.
I never thought I would learn that today. That's great. That's great. Yeah, Because the frustrating part is that wasn't his first punt like 51 yards or something like that, right? Like it was a decent punt, I think so, right?
yeah.
Like a decent boom. Yeah, it's just punting. I don't know. Maybe this is a next year is gonna be better than this year type of situation. I'm not really sure, man. Like we had that one game where he was great, and then he's been pretty the rest of it. And today you saw one good one and then one bad one. It's just it's not great. Good for Yoakum, right, to get his first career field goal. I know he missed another, but
man, he was jacked to get that too, and I don't blame him. That was a big moment. It was a big moment in the game, and he nailed it. That was great. Turned it into a 3-possession game. It was really, really important.
I didn't think that thing was going to fade in for a second, Vince. I was like, oh, I think he pushed
snuck
it a little
thing
bit.
in, man. He snuck it in. Well, and then he overcompensated on the next one and pushed it to the right. I mean, talk about a life of a kicker, but yeah, he hit that first one, which was, like I said, it was huge in the moment. He was fired up. He's a walk-on. It was good for him, but I guess I wasn't overly surprised he missed the second one because that's kind of who he is. He's kind of a 50% guy.
Yeah. Well, but then outside of that, obviously good for him to make his first career field goal because, I mean, he's put in a really tough spot, right? Like no one expected Zach Yoakum to be 100%. The place kicker tonight in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So good for the kid to make one. The creativity from Marty Biaggi that we talked about a little bit. I mean,
through the roof.
It was great. Obviously the fake punt, and then he had the fake field goal that they got for a first down as well with Buckner. So it was really good stuff in the the fake kicking game, I guess. And then I'll say this, dude. I would still love 1 year to have one of these dynamic athletes that we keep getting in the recruiting process to be able to be a dominant punt returner, to be a guy that can flip the field. But one big play, Hurleman early in the game fielded a punt where I question that if it was Jaden Greathouse or someone else, I question if they would have came up and fielded it, and if they wouldn't have, probably would have been a massive role for the kicking game, right? So I think Hurleman's done a really admirable job as a punt returner. He's played his butt off on all core team special teamer. Bryce Young, can't forget about him, blocking the field goal, obviously, as well.
Huge.
Notre Dame apparently, they say they're tied for first in blocked field goals over the last 2 years or something like that, right?
I forget what the time frame was, but they're tied with Georgia Tech, apparently, in that regard, which nuts. Yeah. And it came into play today.
Yeah. So he's got some creativity. Max Hurleman's doing a good job fielding punts, and they can block field goals. So there's some good. There's some that obviously needs to improve. So it's a little bit up and down as far as a full special teams. But I thought we saw a lot of really cool and fun, innovative ways to continue drives today, which I thought was interesting.
It was very interesting. That was one of the most intricate and creative fake punts I think that I've ever seen. You don't usually see the ball get into the hands of 1, 2, 3 different guys on one play. Is that how many it was? Because it was the snap, it was a handoff, and it was the reverse.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously you want to get the ball in the hands of Jeremiah Love, which they did, and he did a great job of making that guy miss in space, because if that guy makes the tackle, they don't get the first down. Was there any
doubt? Was there any doubt he was going to make that guy miss, though, when you saw it was Jeremiah Love? There was zero chance anybody was going to make a tackle in mid-space.
And the way that guy was coming in like a heat-seeking missile, it's like, dude, you don't have a chance. Like, you better break down if you're going to try to take down Jeremiah Love. And now he just, I don't even think he just kind of moved his hips a little bit. It was like,
dude,
just went right
He's got
by
a little dead leg that is insane. Also, shout out, because I think it was to the up back, and then it was technically a forward pass that was a reverse, right? So I think it was Davis Sherwood 1-for-1 in his career for 12 yards. So shout out to Davis Sherwood, man.
Davis Sherwood, the fourth string. Is it fourth string? Tight end or whatever his position is.
Is he over Bauman? I don't know. I mean, I guess
I think it's an or on the depth chart, probably.
That's fair. That's fair. We'll take the or on that one. Yeah, so special teams actually played a part in this one. Like you said, we had 2 fakes. And then we got to give props to Marty Biaggi and the staff for the fake on top of a fake, getting Tyler Buckner in there as the holder because he has the same jersey number as Matt Salerno, and him taking the ball on the fake.
I thought it was Salerno. I literally put out a most shade of all time in a tweet where I said he was my favorite Salerno of all time. It was so much shade in one tweet.
Well, the official scoring also had it as Matt Salerno. They have since fixed it to be Tyler Buckner. So not only did the announcers get it wrong, and another person that works for Irish Breakdown got it wrong, and a lot of other people got it wrong because he didn't take off his helmet until he got on the sideline, obviously. And it was like, oh, who's that masked man? That was Tyler Buckner. I don't know how Chris Salerno runs the football, but as soon as he started running, I was like, that's Tyler Buckner right there running that football. But hey,
I thought it was Chris Salerno, and for a second I was like, oh, there's our future punt returner. There he is. Right there.
The only problem I have with this is I feel like they didn't need to bust that one out right now. Like, I would have loved in the playoff to see Tyler Buckner get that fake field goal run. You know what I mean? Like in a big moment.
Trust me, Vince. Marty's got a lot left in his bag, sir. He's got a lot left in that bag.
There's only so many times you're going to be able to sneak Tyler Buckner onto the field, though, without people knowing it, though. Right?
So just wait for the fake jet reverse pass. It's coming.
Well, and Tyler Buckner, I think, is the backup holder, by the way. So 2 number 26s are the holders for Notre Dame. And so it wasn't completely out of the question that he was out there as the holder, but I just thought that was hilarious that he was the one that ended up doing that, and nobody knew who he was. So that
did you see that they snuck Deion Colsey on the hands team at the end, and they put number 6 on him instead of because he couldn't wear 0 because Xavier Watts was out there? I don't know if you saw that.
I heard them announce 0, and I was like, why are they changing Xavier Watts' number?
Yeah. Deion Colsey, baby. Yeah,
I saw it and I thought of the opposite thing. I was like, dude, Jordan Faison looks gigantic. I was like,
he's 6'5" now? He's 6'5"?
I was like, what happened? I was like, dude, that ankle rehab is next level stuff, dude.
That's fantastic. That is awesome. Well, fellas, any more comments about special teams before we move on to our next segment?
It was special, man.
It was special today. It was special. I wish you would have hit that second field goal. That would have made things all the more better. But hey,
it would have been almost perfect outside of that punt, right? It would have been almost perfect.
You're not wrong. That punt was disappointing, though. It just was, but only because it's shades of potential future. That's the only thing I would be worried about, because that was your moment to practice that in a game situation. But anyway, I digress. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. We're going to get to the defense in just a second, but before we do, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and of course, jump on the boards@irishbreakdown.com for all of your intel needs. We won't lead you astray with fake news before games, so make sure you stick around with boards@irishbreakdown.com. Gentlemen, let's talk about the defense and what they were able to bring to the table today. And outside of that first drive, guys, the defense pretty much handled their business in this one. And that seems to be a bit of a recurring theme for Notre Dame's defense. Is takes them a minute to kind of get settled in. And a lot of things look like it's working for Georgia Tech or for any opponent for that matter. And then as the game wears on, it's like, yeah, that stuff really actually doesn't work now that we've seen it one time. And so the defense just shuts them down. Overall thoughts on the defense, Ryan? I'll let you bat lead off on this one. Defense had a good night. What say you?
It's the fastest Notre Dame defense I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, that's my biggest takeaway. I think that you can talk about the defensive line and talk about, Howard Cross and Riley Mills showing up in big moments in this game and having some big plays. You could talk obviously about the second level, because I thought this was Drake Bowen's best football game he's played in a Notre Dame uniform so far. Kingston made some plays. Jaden Osbury made some plays. Even Jalen Sneed made some plays. Jack Kaiser, I thought, had a really good football game.
Yeah, he was around the football a lot.
And the secondary, man, I mean, it's just like Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, Xavier Watts, they all made plays in this football game, right? Ultimately. So this is a fast defense, dude. It's a long defense. I went back. I talked about that 2023 recruiting class. I think that signifies just this is what Marcus Freeman wants his defense to look like, though. It's long, explosive, and can run for days. So, yeah, there was a little bit of changing of just kind of your thought process and schematics early on after that first drive. But, like, overall, man, the defense played lights out, and that team is just – it was swarming, dude. Like, I mean, it was like Haynes working to the perimeter, Singleton working to the perimeter, and it's just like when Notre Dame wasn't taking awful angles of pursuits, they were just swarming to the football, working to the perimeter. So fastest, most explosive defense that I have seen at Notre Dame in my lifetime, in my opinion.
Trevor, thoughts on the defense, sir?
I thought that outside of the first quarter, the defense communicated really well today. Georgia Tech does a lot of things pre-snap, and it was getting to them a little bit in the first quarter. Afterwards, I thought they were communicating really well, and they were not as out of place as they were before. To kind of build off of Ryan's point about how fast this defense is, we got to see today how insane this defense can be when they're using their speed when it's assignment correct and not to like fix a mistake. Does that make sense? Like in previous games, it's, well, they were out of spot or they were out of position, but they're just so fast and athletic that they were able to make up for it with how athletic they are. Today, we got a really good opportunity to sit back and look, and especially second quarter on, of, yo, they were in the correct position and still playing with that same speed. This defense is really good, man. This defense is really good, and it's very fast. I think that in obvious passing situations, the secondary played really well. Some of the sacks that the defensive line got, those were coverage sacks, man. They were. And I think they played really well downfield. Cool having another game where both safeties get an interception. That's also really refreshing. But yeah, I think overall everybody played fantastic. I'm not going to harp too much on it because I think we all know that Drake Bowen played out of his mind today. I mean, that guy was just all over the field. And if there was a clear coming out party for one of the players on Notre Dame's defense today, it was Drake Bowen, which gives me a lot of hope because he's kind of that focal point of the defense, right? So I will say, like, we talked all week about, like, is depth going to be a question? I know in one of the shows throughout the week, it was which injury is going to be the one to kind of tip it past the breaking point. Well, listen, guys, Jamal Haynes rushed for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Notre Dame's defense held him to 15. I mean, that's spectacular and nothing short of it. So really promising what we've seen from the defense. And if they can continue to play at this level, and they are going to have a different test next week with Navy. I'm not going to dive too much into it because we have all of next week to talk about what that matchup is going to look like. But looking at their performance today, you hold a really good Georgia Tech, a really explosive Georgia Tech offense to what they did today. Shut them out for 3 straight quarters. It's a heck of a performance.
Sean, defensive thoughts overall.
Yo, I just want to focus on, because I'm sure Ryan and Trevor have covered just about everything, but I just want to go ahead and start with the men in the middle, man. I think this defense has been good, but if Rowley Mills and Howard Cross III are going to play at this level consistently, it just makes everybody else better. And if this defense in back-to-back weeks, last week you take away Ashton Daniels' rushing yards, and they're under 80, and they come back today against this rushing offense and this offensive line and hold them to what they held them to. If they do that, that just solidifies and strengthens the back end even more. And now you start talking about playmakers like Drake Bowen and Kingston coming along, the one-handed sack by Kingston off the edge. I mean, like, yo, like Trevor said, this defense in the class of 23, which they said when they were being recruited that they were going to be the turning point class. They were going to be the class. They felt like they were going to be the class to finally bring a championship to Notre Dame, and they are trending in that direction, definitely from a defensive standpoint and an offensive standpoint as well with guys like Jeremiah Love. So the defense, once again, they just continue to excel. Benjamin Morrison is an incredibly tough loss because he brings so much. He is a deterrent to offensive coordinators. They don't even want to throw that way. I was shocked that certain teams, it was the 2 MAC schools that actually had courage to throw at Benjamin Morrison, right? And the Power 4 schools, totally different. But Leonard Moore, once again, acquits himself very well. He acquitted himself very well in a quick relief situation at Christian Gray against Louisville, against top-notch receivers. And I would like to say that the fastest receiving corps or skill position groups that they face against Louisville and then Georgia Tech, they have played B to B plus level football from a secondary. I think early on, it took them a while to get used to that speed on the perimeter, and they missed some plays in space. But once they got used to it, and Drake Bowen, good gracious, the way he met Jamal Haynes in the hole, had him laid out. They were physical today, Vince. I'll say this. I felt like this was a team that was going to test the physicality of Notre Dame. And Notre Dame walked in that building and became the bully. And that was amazing to see. Like, we can talk about mistakes, everything. Notre Dame bullied Georgia Tech in the trenches for the most part. They control the trenches for the most part. We can point out guys like Biggers and other guys that had games with Georgia Tech. But for the most part, Notre Dame controlled the trenches. They controlled the physicality. They took it to Georgia Tech. And that, I think, was kind of off-putting for Georgia Tech because they're used to being the team doing that to everybody else, right? And you're talking about an offensive line that eventually wore down, only one sack given up in pass pro all season. And in the second half, the Notre Dame defense just came at them in waves, and they put a hurting on, man, that young man, he's going to be, man, please don't show him film. Don't let him come to the building for like 2 days. Just let him soak, man. Just let him soak.
Yeah.
And I tip my cap to him on that last touchdown.
Yeah.
He was definitely.
Because he got drilled.
Yes.
Oh, dude, that last run to the sideline where Drake hawked him down, dude, it was like a wildebeest and a lion. And I was like, oh, Lord, that's not great. That's not great.
Yeah, Vince, for me, it was just, they just bullied, man. They just bullied Georgia Tech defensively, man. They hit, they covered, and they were just sound and fundamental. And that has to have Al Golden smiling right now because they really played well. They really did.
Look, defensively, there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about here, in a very positive way. And I mean, I love looking at drive charts and talking about answers and all of those different things, right? So, Notre Dame gives up that 13-play, 71-yard drive, took 7 minutes off the clock, in this game, a little over 7, like 7 minutes and 6 seconds, I believe. Total time of possession for the entire game for Georgia Tech was 24 minutes. So that one touchdown drive for Georgia Tech was like, what is that? Just under a third of their incomplete time of possession for the entire game. So the drives after that, punt, turnover on downs, punt, field goal attempt. I believe it was blocked. Intercept. No, that was the one that, no, that was the blocked one, I think. Then interception, turnover on downs, interception. And then, of course, they scored that touchdown at the end on the second team defense. So, guys, I mean, the defense, yes, they gave up that second drive, which obviously isn't great. The first drive ended in a punt. So they forced Georgia Tech to punt the ball 4 times and technically turned them over 4 times. 2 on downs, 2 on interceptions. And then, of course, they had the field goal attempt and then 2 touchdowns. So, defensively, they just played amazing. You knew that they were going to try to be, they meaning Georgia Tech, they were going to try to be run heavy because of the quarterback situation that they had. Notre Dame held them to 64 yards on the ground. 64 yards on the ground officially. And I believe that is 2.2 yards a carry.
Can I give you a great stat, too? The
Please.
2 previous games, Georgia Tech was averaging 308 yards rushing a game, the 2 previous, and they only had 60-something today, which is wild.
64 yards. And look, and people, when they think about Notre Dame's defense, they can't stop the run on consistently and all that. Georgia Tech was just running into a wall the entire game. They were. The only reason they scored that touchdown when they did, the one that actually mattered, I'm not talking about the second one, the one that actually mattered, the only reason they scored that is because they big played a couple of times in the pass game, which nobody really was expecting from Pyron, or however you pronounce his name. I mean, he made plays. Like, he made some plays in the passing game that I don't think a lot of people thought was going to happen. Notre Dame made some mistakes as well, leaving the tight end wide open a couple of different times and allowing for some easy completions for some of those big plays. But look, man, Notre Dame just played very, very well outside of a couple of coverage busts, I would say. And the run, what is very good to me, especially going into next week. Now, I know we're going to see a completely different defensive scheme, next week against Navy. And we'll probably see another different defensive scheme against Army because they're going to study what Notre Dame does against Navy and try to scheme that, right? But stopping the run, I think, was the biggest thing for me defensively, big picture wise, because that has been their, if they have a weakness, that's been their weakness. And again, Georgia Tech was going to try to run the football on Notre Dame. They absolutely were going to try to run the football on Notre Dame. And Notre Dame just said, yeah, you're not going to be able to do that. And so they racked up some pass yards and some things like that because they had to. They didn't really have a choice except to do that. So any more? Yeah, go ahead, Ryan. You got something to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think great units, both offensively and defensively, make the opposition play like they're not, play away from their identity, for the lack of a better phrase.
Sure.
Okay. So this is a running football team that's averaging 308 yards a game in back-to-back weeks. And you said you're a passing football team today. That's what you have to do to move the ball.
Yeah.
And they scored 13 points ultimately, and really only 7 when you really talk about
Yeah.
it, right? So, and no shot at them. Jamal Haynes is a dude, man. Like, that's an NFL running back, guys. Like, it's flat out NFL running backs. The running back behind him, 27, Alexander, like, he's a solid running back as well. Like, they got some good running backs at Georgia Tech. Notre Dame took their identity away.
Oh, yeah.
I was talking about being purposeful and being kind of a jerk, right? Like being that guy that's the aggressor. Notre Dame's defense was the aggressor, and they basically said, we are dictating what you are today. We're not letting you be what you can be. That was always my pushback on the Miami, Ohio conversation beforehand, when he's just like, oh, we're just going to let them be who they are, and then we'll play to them or whatever. I'm just like, no, you dictate, right? Like, you're the dictator. And today, Notre Dame's defense was the dictator. They said, you are not doing that to us today. Find a different recipe, and the recipe was failure.
And Vince, they didn't allow the mistakes to turn into other mistakes. It was like, okay,
Good
even
call.
that big play down the middle, they brustled up, stopped them, got the ball, field goal. Yeah. Yep. So Leonard Moore, RJ Oben had a really good game against the run today. He's received a lot of criticism. He was really solid against the run. I want to mention him, and then I can't say it enough. I think the eye discipline of Leonard Moore today was really good. Right, that first third down conversion, they got him right because they motioned away from him. He gave cushion, and then they got the tight end out there on the out route for the first down.
Yeah, I believe that was on him too. Yeah,
that was on him. But they tried to get him again on a little bit of switch route, but he had perfect communication, and he picked up the guy that went deep. So they tried to go at the kid. Right, but his eye discipline, and I love him honestly going into this Navy game. The way he runs support on the outside with his size, I'm like, oh, I love him going up against Navy because he loves to stick his nose into the running game. So, like you said, Vince, the stopping the run, the interior defensive line, the linebackers coming along. It's like you feel really good moving forward with this defense. We know what they're missing. This first round talent at cornerback, possibly the best defensive back on the team. But I mean, you still have a dude back there. They have dudes everywhere. They literally have dudes everywhere. And that's scary.
All 3 levels. Yeah.
Every time you snap offensively, it's 5 or 6 guys that can literally make a game changing play.
Yeah. Yep.
It's fun to watch. It's really fun to watch. I don't know how you guys feel. I'm like, either let's score quick or let's get the ball back to the other team so I can watch this defense play. For me, I love watching this defense play so much now at this point. I really want Notre Dame to either score really fast and get the ball back. I was almost mad when they ran the fake field goal. I'm like, oh, man. I thought the defense was going to be right back on the field. I really love watching this defense. I'm joking. I want the offense to score. But I know that's just how much I enjoy watching this defense right now. They're really fun to watch. They really are.
Let's break it down a little bit, fellas. We kind of touched on some different pieces here and there as we were giving our big overall thoughts. Let's start in the front, work our way back. Again, I think Sean brought it up. This is the 3rd game in a row where the defensive line, especially the interior, has brought it. And I just like the fact that those guys specifically are starting to stack some games and really affect other teams' offenses because they're putting their guys in the lap of the quarterback, and he doesn't have a prayer or know what to do with himself when that happens. I mean, there were multiple times today where the Georgia Tech quarterback had to run for his life because as soon as he set up to throw the ball, he had the rear end of an offensive lineman right in his face. And so he had to do something, right? And so he was scrambling. He was off his mark on numerous occasions. And it was because of what this defensive line was able to do and the pressures that Al Golden was bringing and all of that. But let's start up front, guys. Trevor, your thoughts on the defensive line in this one?
Yeah, Riley Mills played like a grown man today.
Yes,
that's what I think of the interior defensive line. I mean, look, I do think, and there's a lot of conversation around like, well, we need a bigger defensive line. And like, I think some of those things can be true, but I do think that Riley Mills and Howard Cross complement each other really well, especially when they're playing like how they've played in the last 3 games. I really do. There were plays where Howard Cross showcased how quick his hands are when he was penetrating and getting into the backfield. But for the most part today, man, I mean, Riley Mills just showed, like, you hear all the time about him being on like the all NCAA like freaks list of, you know, just big guys playing certain positions. I mean, today he played like he was 6'5", 295 in the middle of a defensive line. I mean, he was just, as much as we want to talk about what Biggers did to the Notre Dame offensive line from play to play, Riley Mills did that times X to the Georgia Tech offensive line today. I mean, it was very refreshing to see. I will say, like, I think the edge players played well. They didn't do anything that really blew me away. I will say Kingston Viliamasa had a pass rush. I think he ended up getting away. But Kingston Viliamasa, he's getting real good at when he's rushing the quarterback, the little shoulder dip that he has where he's almost like parallel to the ground with him coming around the edge. Another just young guy that showcases the depth of talent that Notre Dame has on defense. But defensive line today played really well. The interior, I think, stole the show. I am going to be interested to see, because Stanford and Georgia Tech from a schematic standpoint are relatively similar. They look to run the ball first. They both have athletic quarterbacks, but they're not really a downfield passing threat. Now, if the interior defensive line continues to get pressure the way that they do, I'm still going to feel very confident about Notre Dame's pass rush. But thinking big macro view here down the road, going to be interested to see what the edge rush starts to look like when you start playing more passing-oriented teams. Different conversation for a different day. After evaluating it today, the interior defensive line played fantastic, and Riley Mills is really starting to turn it on here midway through the season. Can't emphasize that enough.
Sean, thoughts, D-line?
Oh, Trevor said it all. I think they've been fantastic. You start to see them come on at the Louisville game. Louisville was the game where you saw them take on the challenge. They start to be physical up front. And I mean, the way they played, they gave up plays to a top, maybe depth-wise guys. Louisville might have a top 5 running back room. I mean, that running back room is really good as well with Brown, Chaney. They have some dudes, and I thought they really took over that game and started to apply pressure to Shuck. Last week, Ashton Dang, he took a beating. Daniels took a beating. He had to lead the game, right? Once again, the physicality. Today, Pyron, he takes a beating. They're physical. Even when he gets the ball off, they're hitting him. Burnham almost had a strip sack that led to a tip ball. I mean, everybody just came on. I was worried the first 2 drives because I thought Pyron had a lot of time to throw. But then as the game went on, it just seemed like that once again, Notre Dame, Al Golden, they just become like this boa constrictor of a defense. Like, you better get them early, because if you don't get them early, they're going to close in on you as the game goes on and apply more and more pressure. And that's what they did to the Georgia Tech defense today. The defensive line, they were spearheads of that effort. And so kudos to them. I think they set the tone with the physicality and the way they play.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cross and Mills were challenged last week, obviously, against Louisville, and I think that they responded with a couple great weeks in a row now. So I think overall you're looking at a team that is trending upward on the interior, and I think that Gabriel Rubio being back is a big thing for this team as well. And I think that he had some good quality reps. Joshua Burnham was probably the best edge defender that I saw today, outside of if you want to count Kingston as an edge on a couple reps on obvious bad situations. So defensive line played well. I think that they kind of did a lot of the dirty work and let guys like Drake Bowen and Jay Nosbury and those types of guys kind of capitalize on big plays. But overall, I thought the defensive line did a very good job.
All right, let's mix it up a little bit, Sean. I'm gonna have you hit lead off here. Let's talk about the speed, athleticism, and play of the linebacking core today. I mean, holy crap! Like, these guys are coming into their own as a group, aren't they?
Even more than that, the speed is obvious. They're really smart. They're really smart because I thought the eye discipline, the shifts, the motions that Georgia Tech used, even when they were successful, was because they just had fast guys that made plays in space, right? And just beat Notre Dame's guy in space. And then eventually Notre Dame, because Notre Dame was rarely out of position today. No matter what Georgia Tech threw at them, they were in position, right? And their guys were there. And I think that shocked, Georgia Tech, because they were so used to having guys in space, no one there, getting big plays. And today that just wasn't the case. That point of reference, the play with Jaden Osbury in space. But he was literally just waiting. He was waiting on Jamal Haynes. And Jamal Haynes gets the ball, and he's probably used to coming around that corner and not being touched or not having a defensive player to engage him.
What a great tackle, man.
All of a sudden, it just stood him up, man. Just stood him up.
Like, is that not teach tape for how you make a tackle in space?
Yeah.
I mean, just unbelievable. Like, that's not, and people need to understand that is not an easy thing to do against anybody, let alone against the talent that kid has. Like, that was as
coming full speed.
Yes,
he's coming full speed. You're in a stationary position.
Yeah.
To line him up, and then for Jamal Haynes to try to run inside and had Drake Bowen just the hole was there. I don't know. I would be interested in watching that play from the all 22 because it looked like there was a hole there, and all of a sudden Drake Bowen just showed up, and you just saw Jamal Haynes go backwards and land on his back and stay on the ground for a few minutes as they came out to tend to him. So not only are they fast and athletic, but they're really smart and they're picking everything up. And we talked about you get better with reps. You can visibly see them getting better with reps. The entire linebacking core, you can see it. It's visible. And, we want to see that in other areas with their reps, but with the linebackers, man, sky's the limit on how good they're going to be by the time we get to the end of November.
Absolutely. How can you say the light has turned on for Drake Bowen without saying the light has turned on with Drake Bowen? Like, holy crap, the last couple of games that he's had, because he had a bit of a slow start, right? He wasn't, he was playing okay, but he was a little bit slow on the uptake of coming downhill and doing some different things, and he flashed here and there. But holy smokes, watching him play now, you want to talk about being comfortable in a defense and being comfortable with what you're able to do and comfortable with the guys around you and just making plays. And then not only is he making plays, and I don't want this to sound negative because it's not negative, but he's making plays and he's making them in a nasty fashion. Like, when he tackles a guy, like, he tackles him with some vigor behind it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's kind of twisting some guys and he's doing some different things and he's making them second guess coming into his hole, basically. Like, you're going to run at me, you're going to pay the price. And not only that, but he's running guys down from behind. I mean, he is showing us the middle linebacker that I was hoping to see earlier, but man, is he coming into his own now in game 7 of this season. Actually, in game 6 and 7 of this season, but he was even better today than he was last week. And holy cow, is he fun to watch at the linebacker position, man. Oh, my goodness. Trevor, I hand it to you, sir.
No, I appreciate it. Honestly, I don't have too much more to add. The thing that I'm going to say, Marcus Freeman has said it. He says it a lot in the offseason, is clarity equals velocity. And I think you see that on full display with the linebacking core. They're playing free. They're letting their athleticism take over without sacrificing playing intelligent football. And Jaden Osbury made probably the most impressive tackle today in space of a Notre Dame defender this season. That's where I'm at.
Ryan.
I mean, we're an echo chamber, so I don't want to echo
That's
this
fair. That's fair.
conversation too much. But I will say this is that the development that we've seen of Drake Bowen over the last couple games, including what we saw tonight, is we always talk about the run defense needs to get better, right? The run defense needs to get better. The most basic level is you need to get better on the first and second levels, right? And be more gap sound. But having a linebacker that can play tackle to tackle like Drake Bowen's playing right now allows everybody else around him to play so much freer, which I think is going to be big time for a run defense. Because what did we see today? Drake was shutting everything down inside and making some plays outside the numbers as well. But like inside was where his bread and butter was. And then when they're trying to get to the perimeter, whether it be in the passing game or in the running game, what was happening? We were seeing this team speed of Notre Dame be able to rally to the football and make plays along the perimeter. So I think the maturation and the upside that we're seeing from Drake Bowen, if he continues to mature the way he has the last couple weeks, this run defense is going to get tons better very quickly because everyone else around him is going to be able to play freer, play faster, and you're going to depend on Drake to be that tackle-to-tackle inside linebacker with range that Notre Dame has been missing for like a because, again, J.D. Bertrand was a good player, but J.D. Bertrand was limited in some capacities. Drake Bowen's not limited athletically. There's nothing about him that is limited. So if he's playing like this and continue to get better, the run defense is going to be a whole lot better moving forward.
I just want to say, if today wasn't the coming out party of Drake Bowen, which it probably was, wait till you see how many tackles he racks up next week. I'm just going to throw that out there because the triple option is a middle linebacker's dream. I mean, it's an absolute dream to play against. Just ask Jesse Stiers about how much he liked playing triple option when he was a middle linebacker back in high school and college. It is, I mean, and you were a linebacker, right, Ryan? I mean, that's what you want. That's what you pray for if you're a middle linebacker. So he's, prediction time, he's going to have a heck of a game, and he might be in double-digit tackles, and I wouldn't be surprised, like high double digits, like 14, 15, like that could be where he's at next week. So very impressed with the way he's playing right now. Let's go secondary, fellas. Final spot of the defense to talk about. Benjamin Morrison, best player. You could say best player on the defense, best corner, yes. All-American, yes. All of those things. The loss of Benjamin Morrison, massive to this team. Massive to any team, right? But Benjamin Morrison is a captain, all of those different things, right? So he's out. Leonard Moore in. Thoughts on the secondary? Ryan, I'll let you go first since everybody stole your thunder on the linebackers.
No, I mean, I think that Leonard Moore meshed, I think, well in his expanded action, right? I think that there's always going to be some plays. Like, I think he missed the tackle on the one explosive they had, right? Like, there's always going to be a couple of those plays as a freshman corner. But overall, I thought Moore played well. I thought it was really smart of this defense as well because they've been a man-heavy team. I saw a lot more zone in this game, which I think was smart of Coach Golden to be able to do some of that stuff to make sure that you are playing a lot of speed, right? Like Singleton can run. A couple of these other kids can run. So making sure that you have a little bit of coverage from the back ends, I think is a good thing against this type of team. But I think Leonard Moore played well. And I'll say this, man. We're going to joke about Christian Gray, just having feet for hands, all due respect here, right? I mean, that dude should be leading college football. He should be leading college football in interceptions if he had some hands. He really did. But he is an incredible cover corner. Like, absolutely incredible. No one, I mean, I feel like he doesn't give anything up at this point. Like, needs to be a little bit more consistent tackling in space at times. But, like, from a coverage perspective, Christian Gray's a dude. Jordan Clark is playing exceptional football. And those safeties, dude, like, yeah, Xavier Watts took a bad angle on that one play that eventually led to a touchdown. But overall, Xavier Watts played another really good game for Notre Dame. And then Adon Schuler, it's crazy to say, but when Xavier Watts leaves, we're going to be like, all right, Adon, you're the star safety now. Like, there you go, brother. So,
and there's going to be some serious competition for the other safety too, by the way, with the depth that they have at safety. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, man. So the future is bright. The present is very bright. This past defense, this defensive back room that Coach Mickens continues to put out there, it's special. Like, it just is special.
Trevor, secondary.
I mean, they played great. The perimeter passing game was on lockdown today. It really was. There was some stuff open in the seam throughout the game, but outside of that, I mean, it was. Gosh, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Like, it's when we talk about like defense and takeaways and things, like you want to talk about getting real nitpicky. I mean, look, there are things like I said, Xavier took a bad angle and missed a couple, but again, you hold a team to 7 points, you hold one of the best running backs in the ACC to 15 yards rushing. The secondary played great. I think a lot of questions were answered about Leonard Moore because he was tested, and he was tested relatively early. And by no means is he a finished product, but there is a lot of good stuff to work with. And it also showed that this was not his first start. You know what I mean? Like he looked comfortable. And Sean, you brought it up earlier. I'll say this. My biggest takeaway is how willing Leonard Moore is to go and make tackles. Because if there was one, and I don't want to knock an All-American captain, but if there was one issue with Ben Morrison, it was his size and being able to come downhill and make tackles close to or in the box. Leonard Moore showed that he's willing to go and stick his nose in and make some of the dirtier plays. So I'm happy with it. I think the secondary played really well today.
Sean, anything to add about the boys in the back?
Yeah, Double R pointed out. Look, they played really good assignment football on the back end. Your playmakers, when they had an opportunity to make a play, Jordan Clark probably could have had a pick six. That Christian Gray, you go watch that play. That was a tough intercept. If he makes that, he probably would have had to lay out in the end zone.
No excuses. No excuses. You know what they say about excuses. All right.
Come on, man. Like, he's had some that were like, okay, you got to catch that one. The fact that you're missing, like, he defended a double move from one of the fastest receivers in the country and pretty much became the receiver. I don't forget.
It was a great rep. He didn't finish though.
Great rep.
He's not a finisher.
Absolutely great rep. That's fine. He says he has a couple more years to become, well, probably one more year to become.
I was gonna say at least one. At least one.
But no, I think that's what stood out to me, guys. They played really good assignment football. I knew that they wouldn't come in and play man-to-man as much with Leonard Moore starting in the place of Benjamin Morrison. I expected that. And he did exactly what he was asked to do. He gave up the one slant that led to a big play. He'll learn from that, and he'll get better. But once again, just like the linebacker, this is a young man. With each rep and each game, you continue to see him get better. They'll gain more confidence with him, and the more confidence he gets, they'll get even more aggressive defensively. So, man, you talk about that safety position. They got some dudes coming in that are going to be challenging to start at safety. So it's like, man, would I be wrong saying next year's secondary could be just as good?
No. Because
from what we saw today, we're including Benjamin Morrison into that conversation.
Because I'm thinking he might come back. Let's just say he might come back.
I mean, it's possible depending on where he is with his recovery when all the draft stuff goes down, right? I mean, look, Ryan, you're the draft guy, right? If he can't work out, what do you think his draft stock is? I mean, it has to go down, right?
I talked about it this week a ton. I think that he's going to have a very interesting conversation in front of him. Not to like belabor the point, but the NFL is a little bit more mixed on Morrison than I think the media is, right? Like there's some first round evaluation, but there's also some seconds, there's some thirds. I even talked to a team that had a third to a fourth round grade. So like that's a little bit of the outlier. So that's not like
bugging. They're bugging.
Yeah, they're bugging a little bit. I agree. But here's the thing, though, is that in those evaluations, the medicals are obviously a part of it, right? And now we're talking about someone that's dealing with the shoulder this past offseason and now the hip, right? That both required surgery. So, like, there's a little bit of questions of, like, medicals, and we'll see. But if he comes back, it has a chance to be better than this year because, I mean, it's going to be hard to replace Xavier Watts. But, like, I mean, we just saw if Adon Schuler takes a nice step next year, then – you're at least in the ballpark, and then another talented safety is going to get an opportunity to play. I mean, it's going to be The secondary in general, as always, Mike Mickens this year is going to be very good next year and the year after that and the year after that. And the year
as long
after
as he's
that.
here, yeah.
2097, we can depend on a really good secondary as long as Mike Mickens is still alive and coaching. So
they're great communicators. That's what I'm impressed by. They communicate. Everyone that steps on the field, you watch them pre-snap as a secondary, especially with the motions and how they're pointing and communicating, switch. It's really good to see. That's when you have a secondary in sync.
The most interesting one I think next year is, dude, I mean, look, Thomas Harper was good in 2023, guys, but I'm ready to say it. Jordan Clark has been better in 2024. Like, he's just been better. He just has. But he's a senior as well. So, like, who's that nickel next year? I mean, do you go back to the portal? Do you let a guy like a Dallas Golden come in and try to be the nickel? Like, I don't know. Like, it's going to be an interesting conversation. Maybe Carson Hobbs is the nickel. Like, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one, though.
I mean, they've got options, I think, on the roster currently, and especially with some of the guys coming in. I think they've got. You don't really want a true freshman there, obviously, but you've got guys coming in. You've got some depth on this roster, and if Benjamin Morrison comes back, you definitely have depth on the roster, right? I mean, it's gonna. Yeah, you're right. It is going to be interesting to see how
that's a good point, Vince, because then you could say if Benjamin Morrison does come back, then that gives you so many options, because then you could be like, hey, Leonard Moore, you're playing some nickel, brother. Like, do it. Just make
having
it
those
happen,
three on the field at the same time. Like, I'm okay with that too. You know what I mean? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the staff evaluates the position, right? And whether they think they need to go to the portal or not, and what positions they think they need to go to the portal on. Somebody in the chat said they're going to have to go for free safety. I don't think that's the case. I think they got plenty of depth back there at safety, personally. But again, who knows what happens with the transfer portal as far as an exit as well. I mean, that all remains to be seen too, especially with that December transfer window and the spring one for that matter. So that will be interesting as well. Any more comments on the defense, fellas, before we jump into the super chats? Okay, looks like we're good to go. So let's bring up some of these super chats. We don't have a bunch, so we can kind of roll through them here. First one from Tyler Evans. Thanks for the super chat, Tyler. Appreciate you very much. I was thrilled our young DBs stepped up and love the pressure up the middle on D. Yeah, perfect timing with that particular question based on what we're talking about, right, fellas?
Yes. Sorry. I didn't know if anybody else was going to answer, but yes, absolutely. It's, I mean, Tyler, we talked about it a ton, but a quarterback, especially an inexperienced one, interior pressure is a nightmare, right? And then when you have that secondary behind you, it makes for a long day typically. And it did. Even though the Pyron kid played hard, played tough, still a lot to ask for your first start of the year.
Yes. Yes. An absolute lot to ask for. And he was dealing with the defense in his face for multiple reps in this game, and that's what we want to see from Notre Dame's defense. That's for sure.
Well, and another thing too is, Pyron is a backup quarterback, and Haynes King is normally the guy, but that up the middle pressure would have been tough for Haynes King to deal with too. If that defensive line can stay consistent and start doing this against other teams like that, this isn't just going to be specific to an Ashton Daniels or a Zach Pyron. Like, that up the middle pressure is very hard to deal with. So if it can keep up, it's starting to gel at the right time. I'll say that.
Brandon Plensner with a super chat. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you very much. Is this stagnant offense / play calling when we have a lead a Marcus Freeman problem or a Denbrock issue? I honestly can't tell anymore, but leaning Freeman.
I think there's
I was going to say I plead the fifth. I don't want to talk about this anymore. So you go ahead. You be the bad guy, Trevor.
Yeah, I will say this, and I could be looking into this too deeply, and it could be a coincidence, but like I said, and this is a positive, like the offense, when they have had to in the last 3 games, have rattled off points when they've had to. Like I said, against Louisville, the defense had a slower start, and they rattled off 21 first quarter points. And then they had a lackluster first drive. The offense did this game, and then the defense allows a touchdown. So then they ripped off 24 straight points. The trend that I am noticing is when it almost feels like they use the offense to get out of that hole and buy the defense time to start settling in. And then when they do that, it just kind of it gets very like still water. Like a lot of the play designs, a lot of the personnel groupings that you saw when Notre Dame went and rattled off 24 straight offensive points, that kind of went away. So I don't know if I'm going to point the finger at somebody specifically. It's just something that I've noticed in 2 of their last 3 games. So, you always kind of look at like where the buck stops, right? And it's always with the head coach. So, but I don't know if I have enough information to say it's Denbrock or it's Marcus Freeman, but I have kind of noticed trend-wise that it's once Notre Dame gets a comfortable lead, and this is a really good defense that teams just can't come back on, or at least the teams that Notre Dame is playing against currently just can't mount a comeback on. And it feels like once that sets in, that's kind of when like the foot comes off the gas offensively. I'll say that.
I'll say, Trevor, it's a very interesting question because there's really no wrong answer. I mean, if you pick one name out of the hat, you probably are right for a particular reason. Whether it's a coach, head coach, player, at some point, someone has had an impact on this. I will say this for this game. Marcus Freeman gave this offense every opportunity to get rolling. He went forward. He called fake field goals, fake punts. So you can't sit here and say Marcus Freeman didn't want the offense to score. He held them back today. He gave them every opportunity to go out there and put points up on the board. He wanted them to put points on the board. He was frustrated that they weren't putting points on the board, screaming through his headphones. So today, I'm not going to lay that at the feet of Marcus Freeman. So let's look somewhere else because he wanted to pour it on Georgia Tech today. There was no holding the offense back today. Maybe in other games, fine. Today, no, I don't see evidence of that. Today, play calling, players, scheme. Trevor, you talk about it all the time. The offense seeming like you're just picking plays rather than it flowing and leading to something, right? And maybe that's what we saw when things went a little stagnant because you've talked about that in other games. So I don't think Marcus Freeman bears any weight on the offense being held back or anything like that today. He definitely came in being ultra aggressive and obviously getting more possessions for his offense, the most possessions he could to get them in the end zone. So,
I mean, you don't really have to look any further than the 2 fake kicks, right? Because the coordinator is the one that comes up with those things, but the head coach is the one that says now is the time to do them. Old Marcus Freeman doesn't call those plays. He doesn't say, hey, this is a great time to fake it because that's taking a chance. And he wasn't much of a chance taker early on, right? He does it twice in one game. I agree with you, Sean. In this game specifically, Freeman wanted to put some points on the board. And I don't think it was because of a style. Like he's not looking for style points. He wasn't trying to, he wanted to score. Like he wanted in the moment in this game, he wanted points. And he was calling it like he wanted points. So I'm with you on that one for sure.
But once again, you saw him upset. Like we said, they won. Absolutely, they won. They beat a good Power 4 team in consecutive. Well, they beat a good Power 4 team this week. Last week, they beat a really bad team.
A Power 4 team.
Power 4 team.
Power 4 team. Yeah.
Still a Power 4 team. But yes, they won. They've been dominant. Marcus Freeman is beyond that. He's beyond the scoreboard. He's beyond the results. His frustration is the lack of consistency offensively, which he knows. He knows this is going to come back to possibly hurt us. If we don't solve this issue, this could come back and bite us in the butt. He knows that. So he's trying to get everything rectified now, moving forward, as he should. And so I hope he continues to give his offense. I hope he takes chances against a team that's going to try to limit your possessions like Georgia Tech did next week. I hope he does the same thing, find ways to get extra possessions for his offense to give them an opportunity to put more points on the board. And Vince, you said something earlier, right? not to harp on the holding penalty by Knapp and not to harp on other things, but I think with Notre Dame, it hurts because those mistakes have literally directly taken points off the board or taken the opportunity to put points on the board, right? The interception and the holding call, a drive that most likely would have ended up in 7,
Yeah.
and taking 7 off the board.
Yeah.
That is why you harp on it, because that's points. Marcus Freeman probably feels a whole lot better if it's 14 more points on the board, right? And so those are the mistakes that you don't want to have, points that impact the scoreboard directly or in some way indirectly.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely great point. John A1, thanks for the super chat. Kingston might be needed more in the Viper rotation. I want to take a stab at this one first, fellas, if you don't mind. I would say I don't want to pigeonhole Kingston as just a Viper. I want him to be able to be in the middle of the defense going all over the dang place. Now, you can put him over there and do what he does off the edge and things like that at times. I have no problem with that. He's really good at it. But I don't want to be his only thing that he's good at. I want him going all over the freaking place, running sideline to sideline, to be a complement to Drake Bowen and, Jack Kaiser, and get that. I love that 3-man rotation in the middle. And then you add Osbury to that as well. And then even Snead comes in and makes a play. That's where I want him to be. I think he could be a good Viper. I really do. But I want him to be able to do more.
If the interior defensive line continues to play the way that it is and has been the last couple games, I agree. Kingston is a very talented pass rusher, and they've said that about him since he got on campus. And I think that's going to be a facet of his game that they're going to continue to use. There's no way they take him out of the middle of the defense, though, for that purpose, right? So I get where you're coming from here, John, but he's too good to take out. He's too good to take out of that position. He is.
Situationally speaking, I understand it.
Sure.
But as far as, more reps, there's really no need, because they honestly, and speedy recovery to Boubacar, just moving into the future and thinking about it. And you have Young, Boubacar, Logan Thomas, and some of the other guys that they have developing. Tulamaka is playing well on the edge. And I expect him to get better, right? Because this is a kid that was a middle linebacker, moved out to that position, and he's gotten better. And I expect him to progress and get even better. And every year they've gone to the portal to get edge help. They probably do it again. So in special situations, if you want to put that NASCAR defensive line out there and move your D ends inside and then bring him outside, because right now they do that a little bit. I think when they had him on the edge, it was Riley and Donovan Heinrich on the inside, and then they had Jalen Snead on the other side for a couple of reps. So situationally, I can see that.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Florida Irish, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it very much. Great day for the Irish. Appreciate you all for the post-game analysis. Also, I feel for Pyron getting abused by Bowen and Thomas on that final drive. Hope the garbage time TD was worth the pain. It will be in film, but it wasn't in the moment. I can tell you that right now, because the way he walked off the field, he was ready for the ice bath. There's no doubt about it. The defensive line put a hurting on him, especially towards the end of the game. I did feel for the kid. I mean, he gave – I'm guessing, because I don't know, obviously know him or know how he's played his entire career. That's got to be one of the better games he's ever played. And he got rewarded with some rough play there towards the end of the game.
Pyron's a tough kid, man. He earned a lot of my respect. I mean, there's a lot of narrative that goes around when you hear like, oh, they're playing a backup quarterback. And I think by default, a lot of people just assume that they're not good, right? And Pyron came and he was the team's leading rusher. Now, mind you, I will say Notre Dame held their leading rusher running back to 15 total yards. So as long as the quarterback rushed for 16, he would have been their leading rusher. But he made plays where he had to, and he hung in the pocket, man, against a defense that was, and I know we talked about this when we were going over the defensive analysis. They were putting the smack down today, guys. The pads were popping today.
Yes, they were.
I mean, to a level that I hadn't seen yet this season. They were getting after him, and he hung in there, and for the situation that he was put into, because not only were you a backup quarterback and you probably didn't get as many meaningful reps because Haynes King was still trying to go at some point this week in practice. Not only did you have to then go in and do that, you had to do it without a run game. So, I mean, that's hats off to him because he took a beating, but at the end of the day, it was a really good game for Notre Dame's defense. Really, really good.
Yep, no doubt about it. And unfortunately, he paid the price.
Yeah, sure
especially towards the end. And it stacked up. It's not like he wasn't getting hit and he wasn't getting, tackled and everything else throughout the game. But like those hits add up, man. They add up, and they definitely added up towards the end.
Oh man, I mean that's how you earn the respect of all your teammates, man.
Oh.
I mean, you go and you throw a touchdown pass on a zero blitz after getting decleated. You start jogging off to the sideline, and your coach tells you to go back out because you're going for two, and he's just like, all right, here we go. So. I have a lot of respect for Zach Pyron after that. I really do.
You never want to see a guy tap out. I hate this maneuver more than anything, especially when you're not actually injured. But if anybody had the right to tap out at that point, it would have been him in that moment, because going for two at that moment in the game was like, why? But at the same time, like, come on, coach, just kick the field, just kick the extra point. Just kick the extra point. Get our guy. He needs a seat. He needs a seat. The 2-point conversion is not going to do anything for you in this game. Let your boy who put his heart on the field, let him have a seat for a minute before you go for the onside kick, which was also, I mean, I'm not going to tell a team to quit and just kick it off, but like, just let your guy have a seat. All right. Anyway. But yeah, he earned a lot of respect from me as well, because I didn't think he would play as well as he did. I really didn't. In my analysis going into this game, if he was going to play, I was like, this is going to be a blowout because he's not going to be able to move the offense. And he did a really good job. So Isaiah Lehman, thanks for the super chat. The speed and athleticism of this team is refreshing, and I will say that it is appropriate. This is our final super chat of the night, because this pretty much explains the entire game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's refreshing that it's not just at a couple of positions either. In years past on Notre Dame, teams like they got a really fast wide receiver, or in teams past like they have a really fast corner, and like that was kind of it. It's throughout, man, at all three levels of the defense. I know it's going to be tough to believe because we haven't really seen the product on the field as much as we would have liked to, but we've seen spurts of it. There is a lot of speed in the wide receiver room. I would like to see a little bit more of that unleashed, but there is. It's there.
Sure.
And Jeremiah Love is just, I mean, man, I'm telling you right now, if Jeremiah Love played on Alabama or Georgia, I mean, you would have thought that he's just, I mean, yeah, you guys
be Heisman style, you know what I mean? Or like he'd be getting looks, he'd be 100%. Getting talks.
100%.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, I think the one thing that stands out about the speed and athleticism, I think it opens up why it's so good to really have objective conversation, right? Because these are conversations that we had the last 2 years, specifically about the linebacker position. People were like, well, why are you guys hating? So we're not hating. We're just pointing out things that we know exist in the younger players that you're going to see once they take the field. And now that you're seeing it, you can say, oh, that's why you guys were saying that about the players that were playing. That's why you were talking about them not being able to make plays on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage consistently and impactful plays. Yes, it has nothing to do with hating and not wanting guys to do well. It is really an observation of what exists. And it's the same thing that Trevor just pointed out offensively. I do think guys like Cam Williams and Jaden Greathouse, as he continues to grow, and KK Smith and Michael Gilbert are those type of players that eventually will bring that to the offensive side of the ball. So to talk about some of the things that we see offensively now and include the young quarterbacks as well. You know, the passing game will look different and will evolve when these guys get their opportunity, right? So to talk about that and what we see objectively now, it's not being a Debbie Downer. It's just really saying like, yo, this is what it is right now. This is who we are right now. But oh boy, wait until these guys come and start getting implemented into the offense the same way we're starting to see the fruits of what we were speaking of last year, futuristically, and now we're starting to see it. So that's what's great about winning and still being able to talk about what is and what's to come. And speed and athleticism exist on both sides of the ball. We just haven't really seen it the way we're seeing it defensively. We haven't seen it yet offensively, but it's coming. Notre Dame fans, it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, speed and athleticism. That's no longer an excuse when we hear team or analysts talk about Notre Dame. They can't talk about them not being as fast. They don't have SEC speed. They don't have this. Yeah, they do. Yes, they do. Just turn on the tape and watch, because yes, they do. Sometimes in the past it wasn't always going the right direction, but now things are dialed in, especially defensively. And somebody said in the chat earlier that they watched the Tennessee game and Tennessee's defense played really well. They're not as fast as Notre Dame's defense. Yeah, that's right, because Notre Dame's defense is really fast and athletic, and at the end of the day, Notre Dame's defense is going to keep them in every game that they play this season. That's how I feel. No matter what game it is, in the future, whatever, Notre Dame's defense will keep them in every single game that they have in 2024. And I hate to say it, but they might be better in 2025.
Do you guys feel this is one of the most challenging college football seasons mentally for teams?
Has to be, right?
Because I think I just watch week to week. I think it is more mentally challenging for teams. For me, it just comes across like, it is really a week to week challenge for teams. Even if you are the more talented team, I would think it would be easier with more teams being added to the playoffs, but it seemed to have an adverse effect on teams to where, they play even more tight, depending week to week, instead of being that consistent team that we've seen traditionally. So, and it could be a lot of different factors, but I think football right now has been more balanced with talent. You talk about Tennessee's defense is pretty good. They're big and physical up front. I think Notre Dame, the secondary, definitely is better. I think their linebacker core is probably deeper and a little bit more athletic than Tennessee's. But, it's very – how many dominant defenses do you see now in college football, right? Last year you had Bama, you had Michigan. I guess Washington was okay. Their defense really wasn't dominant, but Notre Dame is one of the very few dominant defenses. Texas was deemed as a possible dominant defense.
Not currently.
Going into this game, right? So who knows, man? It is really just one of those seasons where if Notre Dame gets their act together offensively, it could become a special season.
If they can be more consistent offensively, I agree. Yeah. You pair them up with that defense, and they're going to be able to compete with anybody. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to go win the national championship, so people don't start jumping off ledges. I'm saying when you pair a consistent Notre Dame offense with what we've seen them do offensively in certain drives, right? You pair that with this defense, they can compete with anybody. Not saying they're going to beat anybody. They can compete with anybody. And at the end of the day, that's what I want. That's what I want out of my team. I want to be able to say they can compete with whoever they step on the field with, as long as they are properly motivated, properly excited about the game, because we've talked about that too. But from an athletic standpoint and from a talent standpoint, they can compete with anybody. Absolutely. And I think that's hugely important. And that is a place that Notre Dame hasn't been in a while across the board.
Is there anybody you fear, Vince? No. I really had one. I had two teams. I feared the matchup because I didn't think we would be able to score with them.
Texas is one of them.
And Texas was one of them.
But after watching this first half.
Exactly.
I mean, look, Texas is still a really, 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 really good team.
Yeah.
Okay. They didn't have a good first half. Let's see what happens in the second half. They didn't have a good first half. But yeah, Notre Dame's defense can play with what I just saw.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Who's the other team on your list?
I just felt like Ohio State could score.
Okay.
I'm just looking at offenses that can score.
No, that's fair.
Anybody else, I'm like, okay, if you can't consistently score a lot of points, you don't scare me as a team matching up against Notre Dame.
Right.
Right? Because that would be the only team that could get out in front, possibly score early, get out in front. That would be a problem, right? But like you said, now is there a quarterback issue with Texas moving forward? You know, does that come into play? Ohio State lost, but they put up points against Oregon.
Right.
It wasn't like they got shut down. They still put up points. Oregon is a team that probably is going to find a way to put up points. So I don't fear really matching up against
I get it.
Anyone.
Yeah.
If there's one team from a matchup standpoint that I think freaks me out a little bit, the one team that comes to mind is Oregon's speed. That would be the one team that I think that could put Notre Dame's speed to the test. I really do. Like from an outside receiver standpoint, like that would be the game where and I don't think it would be what like happened with Denzel Burke in that game against Oregon. I don't think the numbers look like that against Notre Dame secondary, but it wouldn't be this like we're holding their best guys to 6 yards a catch. Like that is the one team for me. Ohio State is up there. I know you brought them up, but I mean, the crazy thing is every single team this year has shown that they've been beatable. And Sean, to your point, I think the reason why is because the easier games on team schedules are not easy anymore.
Right.
That's the thing. I mean, I was ranked 9th, and they're playing a 3-3 UCF team that is currently up 28-14. Yeah. Alabama lost to Vandy. You know, Georgia looked really bad against a not good Mississippi State football team. Like, it's just those games, I think, in previous years where you're just like, oh, we have who? Okay, yeah, let's run it. Let's go. And they're dogfights now. Whatever that reason may be, it's weird to look at the landscape of college football. It's interesting that you brought that up because I've been thinking that too, of just like this year is weird, man. Like it's an interesting year for college football.
Absolutely.
No doubt about that. All right, fellas, well, that's going to do it for the post-game show here on Irish Breakdown and the IB Nation, Irish Breakdown podcast. 31-13 victory for Notre Dame over Georgia Tech. Stay tuned because while there is a travel day tomorrow for Brian, we will have Upon Further Review Monday evening, I do believe. So stay tuned for that. So we've got one extra day to kind of get into the film and check it out, and we'll bring that to you. We're not gonna leave you hanging, even though it's a travel day for Brian. We're just gonna push it a day, and that means Trevor is going to pair up with Sean on IB Nation Sports Talk on Monday at 5:00. And then I believe we're planning on 7:00 for Upon Further Review, but stay tuned. We'll see what happens. I think there might be some parent-teacher conferences I may have to attend on Monday, but we'll have to check the old calendar. All right. But check it out because we're going to have all kinds of good stuff for you guys. So make sure you tune in on Monday for the 5:00 show and then Upon Further Review following that. So for Ryan, for Sean, for Trevor, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Have a great night, everybody.